I only called the AC repairman because the heat inside my house was unbearable. 115 degrees outside, no air conditioning, just another broken appliance. Or so I thought. But when the technician opened the unit, he looked at me and said words I will never forget. "Sir, this system didn't break. Someone modified it." A few minutes later, we stood in front of my attic door, 5 heavy padlocks. And behind them, a secret that destroyed my family and revealed a monster living only a few steps away from my bedroom. Thank you for being here with us today. Before we begin the story, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share where you're watching from in the comments. Seeing viewers from around the world truly means a lot to us. Also, please remember that some details in this story are fictionalized for storytelling and educational purposes. Any similarities to real individuals or locations are purely coincidental, though the message behind the story is something we hope will stay with you. My name is Edmund Hargrove, and for most of my 68 years, I believed I understood the people closest to me. I thought I could read the meaning behind my wife's smile sense when my children needed help, without them saying a word, and trust the man who called me Dad. Even though he had only married into the family, I believed family loyalty was something simple and unbreakable. I believed that the people who sat at my dinner table could never truly deceive me. Looking back now, I understand how wrong I was about all of it. This story truly began in the spring of 2019, though at the time, it felt like just another ordinary chapter in a quiet life. My wife Linda and I had recently celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. 40 years together had created a rhythm between us that needed very few words. We had built our life in Phoenix slowly and patiently, raising 2 children, paying off the mortgage saving for retirement, and learning to appreciate the small comforts that come with stability. I spent 30 years working as an insurance executive, while Linda dedicated most of her life to teaching elementary school. She loved the classroom more than anything, but eventually her knees forced her to retire earlier than she wanted. Even so, she never lost the warmth that made her such a wonderful teacher. People often described our marriage as comfortable. What they meant was that after 4 decades together, we understood each other almost without speaking. Linda could tell when I had a difficult day simply by the way I loosened my tie. I could tell when she was tired just by the way she leaned against the kitchen counter. Our life was quiet, steady, and predictable, and for a long time, that was enough. Then Linda began complaining about headaches. At first, it seemed like nothing serious. She would rub her temples while we watched the evening news and say it was probably stress or dehydration. But over time, the headaches became more frequent. Soon they were joined by a deep fatigue that didn't seem normal. After grocery shopping, she would collapse on the couch, sometimes too exhausted to even put away the milk before resting. Watching her struggle like that worried me, and eventually I convinced her to see a doctor. Over the next several weeks, she went through what felt like every test imaginable. Blood work scans, and even a visit to a neurologist. Each time the results came back normal, the doctors suggested it might simply be aging, or perhaps mild hypertension beginning to develop. They recommended rest and a healthier diet. Linda followed their advice, though the headaches never completely disappeared. Around that same time, another problem appeared in our lives, one that seemed far more practical at the time. Our air conditioning system suddenly stopped working. In Scottsdale, Arizona, where summer temperatures regularly climb past 115 degrees, a broken air conditioner is more than uncomfortable. It can quickly become dangerous. I called a technician to inspect the system. After a brief look, he mentioned a refrigerant leak and suggested scheduling a repair. Before I could arrange the appointment, my son-in-law Garrett stepped in. Garrett had married our daughter Jessica the year before. He worked in HVAC engineering and liked to remind people of that whenever heating or cooling systems were discussed. When he heard about the problem, he smiled confidently and said, "Edmund, don't waste money on a repair call. I can handle this." He seemed eager to help, and saving money didn't hurt, so I agreed without hesitation. While Garrett worked on the air conditioning system, Linda's conditions slowly worsened. The headaches became more persistent. Some mornings she woke up dizzy and nauseous. A few times she even seemed confused about what day it was. Each time I suggested seeing another doctor, she gently dismissed the idea. "I'm just tired, Edmund," she would say. "We're getting older." By November of 2019, life had settled into an uneasy routine. Linda was still struggling with fatigue and headaches, but we continued moving through our days as if those symptoms were simply part of aging. Then one morning I woke up and found her lying motionless beside me. At first I thought she was sleeping deeply, But when I touched her shoulder and felt the coldness of her skin, I knew something was terribly wrong. She had passed away during the night. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as heart failure. Given how exhausted she had been for months, I accepted that explanation without questioning it. I believed her heart had simply given out. Jessica and Garrett were incredibly supportive during that painful time. They helped organize the memorial service, answered calls from relatives, and assisted me in sorting through Linda's belongings when the house felt too heavy with memories to face alone. Garrett cooked meals and drove me to appointments when grief made simple tasks difficult. Jessica often sat with me in the evenings, holding my hand, while I tried to process the silence Linda had left behind. Looking back now, I realize how deeply I relied on them. Our son Owen lived a very different life. Years earlier, he had taken a job working on offshore oil rigs in Alaska. The work was dangerous but well paid, and it kept him away for months at a time. He returned home for Linda's funeral and stayed about a week before flying back north. Owen never spoke much about emotions, but I could see the grief in his eyes. That brief visit was the last time I saw him in person. By early 2020, the house Linda and I had shared for 3 decades felt unbearably empty. Every room carried a memory of her voice or laughter. The silence was overwhelming. In May, Jessica suggested that I move in with her family. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Dad," she told me gently. "We have plenty of space, and Emma would love having you here." Emma was their 6-year-old daughter, a cheerful little girl who filled every room with energy and curiosity. At first I hesitated because I didn't want to become a burden, but loneliness can be persuasive, and eventually I agreed. Their Scottsdale home was a large ranch-style house surrounded by desert landscaping and warm Arizona sunlight. Emma greeted me with drawings, endless questions, and constant invitations to read bedtime stories. Garrett treated me with kindness and respect, always making sure I had everything I needed. Jessica checked on me, constantly cooking my favorite meals and encouraging me to spend time with the family. Slowly, a small sense of peace began returning to my life. Then 2 months after I moved in, Jessica called me into the living room one evening. Her face was pale and her hands trembled as she spoke. "Dad," she said quietly, "Owen's supervisor just called. There was an accident on the rig, an explosion. They couldn't find him." It felt like the ground vanished beneath my feet. Garrett quickly opened his laptop and began showing me news articles confirming the disaster. Several workers were listed as missing. No bodies had been recovered. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Owen had always worked one of the most dangerous jobs in the country. Accidents happened. Still, I never imagined my son would become one of those names in a headline. Garrett continued sending me links, news reports, official statements, even a fundraising page for the victims' families. Everything looked legitimate. Because I trusted him completely, I never questioned any of it. Jessica and I arranged a memorial service without a casket. We buried an empty box beside Linda's grave. Standing there between those 2 headstones, I believed I had lost the most important people in my life. The years that followed blurred into routine. I helped Emma get ready for school each morning, spent afternoons reading, and joined the family for dinner every evening. Garrett remained attentive. Jessica remained loving. But sometimes, late at night, strange sounds drifted down from the attic above my bedroom. Scratching, footsteps, occasionally a dull thud. When I mentioned it, Jessica laughed and blamed mice. Garrett insisted it was just old plumbing settling inside the house. I believed them. I never climbed into that attic. Garrett warned me the ladder was steep and unsafe for someone my age. So, I stayed downstairs, trusting the family around me, never questioning the noises above my head, and never imagining that the man who called me Dad had already taken everything from me and was quietly planning to take even more. The heat woke me before the sun did. When I opened my eyes, the room already felt like an oven. My pillow was soaked with sweat, and the sheets clung uncomfortably to my skin. The faint glow of the digital clock cut through the dimness, but something felt wrong immediately. The house was too quiet. There was no familiar hum from the air conditioning system, no whisper of cool air flowing through the vents, just thick, unmoving heat pressing down on everything. I pushed myself upright, my shirt damp against my back. Outside the window, the eastern sky was beginning to pale, signaling the start of another brutal Arizona morning. Even before the sun had fully risen, the temperature had already climbed past 100 degrees. I stepped into the hallway and walked to the thermostat. The screen lit up when I tapped it. 89 degrees, inside the house. The system wasn't running. I tried adjusting the settings, lowering the temperature switching modes, even resetting the system entirely. Nothing happened. No click from the unit, no air moving through the vents. The house remained silent and stifling. My first instinct was to call Garrett. He understood these systems better than anyone I knew. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Then I remembered he had left for Houston the day before for some large work project. His phone battery probably died overnight while he was traveling. Jessica wasn't home either. She had taken Emma to Tucson to visit her mother and wouldn't be back until later that afternoon. That meant I was completely alone in a house that was slowly turning into a furnace. By the time the sun fully rose above the desert horizon, the indoor temperature had climbed to 94 degrees. I opened every window in the house, hoping for some kind of breeze. I set up every fan I could find. I even filled a bucket with ice water and soaked my feet in it while sitting at the kitchen table. None of it helped. Without air conditioning, the heat would only get worse. Within a few hours, the house would become unbearable. I had no choice. I needed professional help. After searching online for local HVAC companies, I found one with strong reviews and a 24-hour emergency service line. The dispatcher answered quickly and assured me a technician would arrive within the hour. For the first time that morning, I felt a small flicker of relief. The technician arrived about 45 minutes later, in a white van with the company's logo painted along the side. His name was Ryan Brennan. He looked younger than I expected, probably in his late 20s, with sandy brown hair and a tool belt hanging low around his waist. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm and confident. 8 years working in HVAC, he said, with a friendly smile. I've seen just about every air conditioning problem you can imagine. Something about his calm confidence immediately reassured me. Ryan started his inspection outside near the condenser unit in the backyard. I watched from the patio while he crouched beside the system, checking wiring and gauges. After about 15 minutes, he stood up and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Compressor looks good," he said. "No refrigerant leak. Electrical connections seem fine too. Whatever's causing the problem isn't out here." He walked back into the house and glanced toward the ceiling. "Your air handler is in the attic, right?" I nodded. Ryan picked up his tool bag, a flashlight, and a small handheld device. "Gas detector," he explained when he noticed me looking at it. "Standard safety gear." He pointed toward the hallway where the pull-down attic ladder was located. "Mind if I take a look up there?" For a moment I hesitated. Garrett's voice echoed in my memory. He had warned me many times about going into the attic. "It's a mess up there, Edmund," he had once said. "That ladder's too steep for you. Last thing we need is you falling." But standing inside a house that felt like a furnace, those warnings didn't seem nearly as important as fixing the air conditioning. "Go ahead," I said. "Whatever you need to do." Ryan pulled the cord and the attic ladder unfolded with a metallic groan. He tested the first step before climbing up his tool bag slung over one shoulder. I listened to his footsteps moving above the ceiling, then everything went quiet. I remained standing at the bottom of the ladder, staring into the dark opening above me. 5 minutes passed, then 10. A strange uneasiness began creeping into my chest. What could possibly be taking so long? I almost called out to him, but stopped myself. Maybe the problem was more complicated than expected. Just as 15 minutes were about to pass, my phone vibrated in my hand. A text message from Ryan. I opened it, expecting a quick update. Instead, the message made my blood run cold. "Sir, there's a locked door up here, and my gas detector is going off. You need to come see this." I stared at the screen, reading the words twice to make sure I understood them correctly. A locked door. In the attic, Garrett had never mentioned anything about a door. He had always described the attic as simple storage, old boxes, furniture, and HVAC equipment. Nothing more. And the gas detector. Why would there be gas in the attic? My hands started shaking as I typed a response. "What do you mean a locked door?" Ryan's reply came almost immediately. "You need to see it yourself. Please come up." I looked at the narrow attic ladder. The angle was steep and my knees already ached just imagining the climb. But the urgency in Ryan's message left me no choice. I took a deep breath, gripped the sides of the ladder, and slowly began climbing upward. The timestamp on Ryan's phone later showed the exact moment he had sent that message, July the 15th, 2023, 10:47 a.m. When I reached the top of the ladder, the air struck me immediately. It was hot stale and carried a faint metallic smell. The attic was smaller than I expected, with a low sloping ceiling and barely enough space to stand upright. The only real light came from Ryan's flashlight, which cast long shadows across the wooden beams. Ryan stood near the far wall holding the gas detector. It emitted a steady, high-pitched beeping sound. When he saw me climb up, he turned toward me. His face had gone pale. "Mr. Hargrove," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me what this is." He stepped aside. That was when I saw it. Hidden behind a stack of cardboard boxes and an old metal shelf was a door. A real door with a frame, a handle, and solid wood construction. Across the front of it were 5 heavy padlocks. Thick steel locks, the kind used on storage units. The kind meant to keep something, or someone, from getting out. My vision blurred and the attic seemed to tilt around me. I reached for a nearby beam to steady myself. I don't know," I stammered. "I've never been up here. Garrett told me." Ryan cut me off gently. "Sir, my detector is picking up carbon monoxide, high levels." He pointed toward the nearby air handler. "And you should look at this." I followed his gaze. The metal casing of the unit had been tampered with. Fresh scratches marked the seams, and one of the panels hung slightly loose. Ryan knelt down and pried the cover open with a screwdriver. Inside were the normal components, wires, coils, and ducts. But something else caught my attention. Small holes had been drilled into the heat exchanger, perfectly spaced, perfectly deliberate. Ryan's expression hardened. "This isn't a malfunction," he said quietly. "Someone did this intentionally. These holes allow carbon monoxide to leak directly into the duct system." He stood and pointed toward the locked door. "Based on the way the airflow dampers are set, most of that gas is being directed into 2 places." He paused. "Your bedroom downstairs, and whatever is behind that door." My mind struggled to process what he was saying. Garrett had worked on this system. Garrett had been in this attic many times. Garrett had told me never to come up here. Ryan stepped closer to the door and pressed his ear against the wood. After a moment, he slowly turned back toward me. His expression had grown even darker. "Mr. Hargrove," he said softly. "There's someone breathing in there." I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the attic floor as Ryan's words echoed through my head. Someone breathing in there. The idea made no sense. My mind refused to accept it. A locked room hidden in the attic, 5 heavy padlocks sealing the door shut, and someone trapped inside. Ryan glanced at me, his expression a mixture of concern and urgency. "Mr. Hargrove," he said carefully. "Do you have any idea who might be in there?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came out. My throat had gone dry. Slowly, I shook my head. Garrett had never mentioned any room up here. Jessica had never said a word about it either. For 3 years, I had lived directly beneath this attic. I had heard strange sounds in the night, scratching footsteps, dull thuds, and every single time I had dismissed them because someone told me they were harmless. But this wasn't harmless. This was hidden. Ryan turned back toward the door and examined it more closely. His hand ran slowly along the frame. "The wood's newer than the rest of the attic," he said quietly. "See how clean it is compared to everything else?" He was right. The frame didn't match the older beams and dusty insulation surrounding it. It looked newer, less worn, as if it had been installed only a few years ago. The padlocks hanging across the door were thick, heavy-duty locks, 5 of them in total, each one a different brand. It almost looked intentional, as if whoever installed them wanted to make sure the door couldn't be opened quickly. My heart pounded harder as I stepped closer. The metal shelving unit that had been blocking the doorway showed fresh scrape marks across the wooden floorboards. The marks curved slightly as if the shelf had been moved aside repeatedly and then pushed back into place. The door itself was plain. Smooth plywood painted the same dull beige color as the surrounding walls. No window, no handle on the outside. If Ryan hadn't moved that shelf, I might have lived here another 10 years and never known the door existed. Ryan crouched again beside the air handler and pointed toward the damaged metal panel he had opened earlier. "Look at this," he said. I leaned closer. "These holes right here," he continued tapping the metal surface. "This is the heat exchanger. Normally it burns natural gas and transfers heat safely into the airflow system." He paused and looked up at me, but someone drilled straight through it. I stared at the small puncture holes scattered across the metal. Every time this system runs, Ryan continued carbon monoxide leaks out and travels through the ductwork. My stomach twisted. "But it's summer," I said weakly. "We're not even using the heater," Ryan nodded slowly. "That's true. But someone has been turning it on anyway." He pointed toward a small control switch mounted beside the unit. "The furnace has been manually activated," he explained. "It's been cycling on and off repeatedly." He ran his hand along the nearby duct system. "And these dampers, they're redirecting airflow." His voice grew quieter. "This gas isn't spreading evenly through the house. He pointed toward the locked door. It's being directed. My chest tightened. Directed where I asked. Ryan looked straight at me. 2 places, he said. He pointed downward toward the floor beneath us. Your bedroom downstairs. Then he tapped the metal duct leading toward the hidden door. And whatever is behind this. The attic seemed to sway around me. My bedroom, the headaches, the dizziness, the constant exhaustion I had blamed on age. It wasn't age. It was poison. How long? I whispered. Ryan lifted his detector and studied the readings carefully. Based on the wear around those drill holes and the soot buildup inside the exchanger, he said slowly, I'd estimate 2, maybe 3 months. He looked directly into my eyes. Mr. Hargrove, this isn't a malfunction. He paused. This is deliberate. My heart pounded violently in my chest. Garrett. It had to be Garrett. He was the only one who had ever worked on the HVAC system, the only one who spent time up here, the only one who constantly warned me never to climb into the attic. But if Garrett had done this, why and who was inside that room? Ryan walked to the door and knocked firmly. Hello, he called out. His voice echoed softly through the cramped attic. Can you hear me? No response. Ryan knocked again, louder this time. If you can hear me make a sound, tap on the door. Silence. I stepped forward slowly, my hands shaking. Let me try, I said. Ryan moved aside. I leaned forward and pressed my ear against the wooden surface. At first, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. Then something else. Faint. Uneven. A rasping sound. Breathing. Slow. Strained. Barely there. There, I whispered. Do you hear that? Ryan leaned closer and listened carefully. After a moment, he nodded. Yeah, he said quietly. Someone's definitely in there, and they don't sound good. A wave of panic surged through me. I stepped back and raised my voice. Hello, can you hear me? I shouted. If someone's in there, say something. Nothing. I tried again, louder this time. Please, if you can hear me, answer. Still nothing. Only that faint, fragile breathing. Ryan pulled his phone from his pocket. I'm calling the police, he said, and emergency services. We need to get this door open as fast as possible. Whoever's inside might not have much time. Wait, I said suddenly. My voice trembled. I placed my palm flat against the door. The wood felt rough and warm beneath my hand. Please, I said softly. If you can hear me, just say something, one word, anything. For several seconds there was nothing. Ryan held his phone near his ear, ready to dial. The attic had become so quiet I could hear the faint buzzing of flies somewhere in the rafters. Then I heard it, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. A voice, weak, broken, barely human. Dad? The word struck me like a hammer. My knees buckled instantly. I grabbed the door frame to keep from collapsing. That voice. I knew that voice. I had heard it my entire life. At family dinners, across the house, laughing with his sister. But that was impossible. That voice belonged to someone who had died 3 years ago. Someone I had buried in an empty grave. Dad, is that you? My chest tightened painfully. I could barely breathe. I pressed my forehead against the door as tears spilled down my face. Owen, I whispered. My voice broke. Owen, is that you? For a moment there was only silence. Then a weak cough from the other side of the door. And finally so faint I almost missed it. Yeah, it's me. The attic tilted around me. My vision blurred. Ryan was speaking beside me, but I couldn't understand his words anymore. All I could hear was my son's voice. My son. The one I believed had died in an explosion 3 years ago. The one I had mourned. The one I thought I would never see again. He was here. He had been here the entire time, locked behind a door, breathing poison, barely alive, and I had been living just 1 floor below him, never knowing. My legs gave out beneath me. One moment I was standing in the suffocating heat of the attic, and the next I had collapsed to my knees, my hands bracing against the rough wooden floorboards. Splinters pressed into my palms, but the pain barely registered. My mind had stopped processing anything except the sound of that single word echoing in my head. Dad. Owen. Ryan caught my shoulder before I could fall completely forward. His grip was firm, steady, grounding me in a moment that felt like it was tearing my entire life apart. Mr. Hargrove, he said carefully, his voice calm but urgent. You need to breathe. Just breathe. But breathing felt impossible. Owen was alive. My son, the one I believed had died 3 years earlier in a terrible explosion, was locked behind a door just a few feet away. Locked away in the attic of the same house where I had been living, eating dinner, reading bedtime stories to my granddaughter, and trusting the man responsible for it all. Ryan's voice cut through the chaos in my mind. "We need help," he said firmly, "right now." He was already pulling out his phone, but I lifted a shaking hand to stop him. "Wait," I managed to say. My voice sounded thin and fragile. "Let me call Garrett first." Ryan hesitated but nodded. With trembling fingers, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I nearly dropped it as I tried to unlock the screen. My hands were shaking so badly the numbers blurred in front of me. I had to hear his voice. I had to believe there was some explanation. I dialed Garrett's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then the call went to voicemail. His voice answered calmly, professionally. "You've reached Garrett Vance. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up immediately and called again. The same result. Voicemail. I tried a 3rd time. Nothing. Ryan watched me closely. "He's not answering?" he asked. I slowly shook my head. A cold realization began settling deep in my stomach. Garrett always answered his phone, unless he already knew what had been discovered, unless he was avoiding this exact moment. Ryan spoke quietly. "Call your daughter. She needs to know what's happening." I scrolled through my contacts and pressed Jessica's name. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Dad," she said immediately. "What's wrong?" Her voice sounded normal, concerned but calm. I forced the words out. "Jessica, Owen is alive." The silence that followed was unbearable. 3 seconds, 4, 5. Then she spoke again, her voice unsteady. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Owen died 3 years ago." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "No, Jessica. He's here. He's in the attic. There's a room up here with 5 locks on the door, and I heard his voice. He's been here the whole time." Another pause, longer this time. Then she whispered, "That's not possible." "Ryan found him," I said quickly. "The repair technician. He discovered the room and the carbon monoxide leak. Owen is inside." "Jessica? What has Garrett done?" I heard her breath catch sharply. When she spoke again, something in her voice had changed. It sounded tight, panicked. "Dad," she said urgently, "listen to me. Don't open that door." My mind struggled to process her words. "What, just wait," she said quickly. "Wait for Garrett to come home. He'll explain everything. Don't touch the door until he gets there." I stared at the heavy locks securing the door, at the duct pumping poison into the room, at the thin line of light beneath the frame. "Jessica?" I said slowly. "Owen is dying in there. Dad, please," she cried. Her voice cracked. I realized she was crying. But it wasn't the kind of crying that comes with relief or shock. It sounded like fear, pure, desperate fear. "Let Garrett handle this," she said. "He'll fix everything. Just wait. I'm driving back now. I'll be there in 2 hours. Please, just wait for me." Something inside my chest snapped. "You knew," I said quietly. "What? You knew?" I repeated. My voice sounded colder than I had ever heard it. "You knew Owen was in there." "No," she said quickly. "Dad, you've been lying to me for 3 years. You helped Garrett fake Owen's death. You stood beside me at his memorial service. You cried with me, and the whole time you knew the truth." "Dad, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I shouted. My voice cracked across the attic. She began sobbing openly now. "I didn't want this," she cried. "I didn't know it would go this far. Garrett said it was temporary. He said Owen was trying to take everything from us, and we just needed time. I felt sick. So you locked him in a room," I said. "You kept him there for 3 years." "I didn't know about the carbon monoxide," she cried desperately. "I swear I didn't know. Garrett said he was just keeping Owen out of the way until things settled down. I didn't know about the poison. Dad, I promise." I ended the call. I couldn't listen to another word. My hand shook violently as I hurled the phone across the attic floor. It slid across the boards and struck a beam. Jessica, my own daughter, she had known. For 3 years she had known. Ryan stood beside me, his face grave. "Mr. Hargrove," he said carefully. "We have to call for help now." I nodded slowly. Ryan retrieved my phone and checked that it still worked. Then he handed it back to me. "Call 911, he said. "Tell them everything." My hands trembled as I dialed the number. The line rang once before a woman answered. "911. What's your emergency?" "My name is Edmund Hargrove," I said. My son is locked in the attic of my daughter's house. He's been trapped there for 3 years. There's a carbon monoxide leak and he's barely breathing. We need police and paramedics immediately." The dispatcher spoke calmly. "Sir, can you confirm the address 472 East Larkspur Drive?" I said. "Scottsdale, Arizona. Is your son conscious?" I spoke to him through the door, I said. He responded, but he sounded extremely weak. "Is the door locked?" "Yes," I said. "There are 5 padlocks on it. We can't open it without cutting them off." "Emergency services are on the way," she said. "They should arrive within 10 minutes. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes," I replied. Ryan stepped beside me and held up his own phone. The screen showed that he had been recording everything. The door, he said quietly. The carbon monoxide readings. The damage to the HVAC system. Your call with your daughter. All of it. I looked at him with gratitude I couldn't express. This stranger had just become the only person I trusted. "Thank you," I whispered. Ryan nodded once. "Your son is going to need every piece of evidence we can give the police." The dispatcher's voice returned. "Mr. Hargrove, are you still there?" "Yes," I said. "I'm here. Officers are about 3 minutes away. Stay where you are. Do not attempt to open the door until they arrive. Do you understand?" "Yes," I answered. But as I said, the words, my eyes drifted back to the door, to the 5 heavy locks, to the duct slowly pumping poison into the room, to the thin strip of light beneath the frame. Behind that door, my son was waiting, and I had already made him wait 3 years too long. The sirens reached me before the officers did. At first, they were only faint wails in the distance drifting through the hot desert morning. But with every passing second, the sound grew louder, sharper, more urgent. The noise cut through the heavy silence of the attic like a blade. I was still kneeling beside the locked door. The dispatcher's calm voice continued speaking through my phone, though I barely heard the words anymore. Ryan stood nearby, with his phone raised, documenting everything. Neither of us said a single word. We simply waited. Every second felt endless. 12 minutes after I made the call, the sounds outside changed. Car doors slammed in the driveway. Heavy footsteps pounded up the staircase below. Then the attic ladder groaned as someone climbed toward us. A bright flashlight beam cut through the dim space. 2 officers emerged from the opening. The first was a woman in her mid-40s, her dark hair pulled tightly into a bun. She wore the tan uniform of the Scottsdale Police Department and carried herself with calm authority. "Mr. Hargrove?" she asked. I nodded weakly. "I'm Officer Davis," she continued. "This is Officer Foster. We're going to handle things from here all right." I tried to respond, but my voice refused to work. Officer Davis turned toward Ryan. "You're the technician who called this in." "Yes, ma'am," Ryan said. He pointed toward the air handler unit. "I was here to repair the air conditioning. That door was hidden behind the shelving unit. My gas detector picked up high carbon monoxide levels. When I inspected the system, I found the heat exchanger had been deliberately damaged. Someone drilled holes into it." Davis stepped closer, examining the unit. Ryan continued explaining. "The carbon monoxide is being forced through the ductwork and directed into 2 places, Mr. Hargrove's bedroom downstairs and this sealed room behind the door." He pointed directly at the locks. I also heard breathing on the other side. Officer Davis's expression hardened instantly. She stepped to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. After a moment, she knocked firmly. "This is the Scottsdale Police Department," she called loudly. "If you can hear me make a sound." The attic remained silent. Officer Foster moved forward and listened carefully. After a moment, he nodded. I hear something he said quietly. Very faint breathing. He glanced at Davis. "Whoever's inside isn't doing well." Davis lifted the radio on her shoulder. "Dispatch Unit 12, she said clearly. "We have a confirmed entrapment situation. Subject is breathing but unresponsive. Request immediate paramedic support." She lowered the radio and stepped aside. Officer Foster opened a large duffel bag and pulled out a pair of heavy bolt cutters. The steel jaws gleamed under the flashlight beam. He positioned himself in front of the first padlock. The cutters closed around the thick metal shackle. He squeezed. The lock resisted. Foster adjusted his stance and pushed harder. The metal groaned under the pressure. Then suddenly, crack! The shackle snapped. One lock fell to the floor, one down. Foster moved to the second lock. This one was thicker, stronger. He leaned his entire weight into the cutters. The handles trembled in his grip. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then another sharp snap echoed through the attic. 2 down. My hands were clenched so tightly that my fingers ached. Every second felt unbearable. Owen was on the other side of that door, barely breathing. The third lock took even longer. Officer Davis stepped forward to help. She gripped the cutters firmly, braced her feet, and pulled with all her strength. The metal strained. Then finally, crack, 3 down. By that time, the paramedics had arrived. 2 men in dark blue uniforms climbed into the attic, carrying medical equipment and a collapsible stretcher. One of them glanced at Ryan's gas detector. "What were the carbon monoxide readings?" he asked. 40 parts per million when I first checked, Ryan replied. The paramedic immediately pulled an oxygen tank from his bag and prepared a mask. "Then we need to move fast." Davis and Foster worked together on the 4th lock. It took nearly 5 full minutes before the metal finally gave way. 4 down. Only 1 remained. The final padlock was the largest of them all. Foster positioned the cutters around it. He squeezed the handles. The metal groaned but didn't break. He repositioned his grip and tried again. Still nothing. On the 3rd attempt, he forced every ounce of strength into the tool. Suddenly, the lock shattered apart with a loud crack that echoed like a gunshot. 5 down. The attic went completely silent. Officer Davis grabbed the door handle. She pulled. The door swung open. The smell hit me immediately. Stale air, sweat, something sour and suffocating. The room beyond the doorway was tiny, no more than 10 feet by 10 feet. There were no windows, only a single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, and on a narrow cot in the center of the room. Owen. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. The man lying there looked skeletal. His skin was pale and gray, stretched tightly over sharp cheekbones. His hair hung past his shoulders in tangled strands. His clothes looked far too large for his frail frame. He lay completely still. Then I saw it, his chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The paramedics rushed past me. They dropped beside the cot. The older paramedic pressed 2 fingers against Owen's neck. "Weak pulse," he said quickly. "Very weak." He placed the oxygen mask over Owen's face while the second paramedic attached sensors to his chest and finger. A small monitor lit up. "Pulse oxygen 68, the younger paramedic said urgently. "Blood pressure dropping. We need to transport immediately." I stepped slowly into the room. My legs felt like they might collapse again. Owen's eyes flickered open. For a moment, they struggled to focus. Then they found me. His lips moved weakly, but no sound came out. I dropped to my knees beside the cot. His hand lay limp beside him. I gently took it in mine. His skin felt ice cold. "Owen," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It's me. It's Dad. You're safe now." His eyelids fluttered closed again. His fingers twitched faintly in my hand. The paramedic touched my shoulder gently. "Sir, we need to move him." I nodded and stepped back. They lifted Owen carefully onto the stretcher and secured straps across his chest and legs. He looked impossibly small, fragile, like someone who had been fighting to survive for far too long. The paramedics carried him toward the attic opening. I followed behind them, my legs trembling. By the time we reached the ground floor, they were already loading Owen into the ambulance. I climbed inside beside him. The paramedic moved quickly, attaching IV lines and checking the monitors. Behind me, I heard Officer Davis speaking. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "we're going to secure the scene. We'll need to speak with you at the hospital." She paused. "And we'll be locating your daughter and son-in-law." I turned and looked at her. "Find them," I said quietly. "Find them both." Officer Davis nodded. "We will." The ambulance doors slammed shut. Moments later, the vehicle pulled away, sirens screaming through the streets. I looked down at Owen lying on the stretcher. The oxygen mask covered his face. The monitor beside him beeped steadily. I reached out and gently held his hand again. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm not leaving you again." Before I uncover the truth that changed everything I thought I knew, comment 1 below so I know you've stayed with me this far. Also, please remember that the next part of this story includes some fictionalized details designed to deepen the narrative. While the message remains meaningful, certain events may not be entirely true to real life. If you'd rather not continue, you're free to stop here. St. Joseph's Hospital stood against the Phoenix skyline like a wall of glass and steel shining under the unforgiving Arizona sun. The ambulance doors flew open and the paramedics rushed Owen inside, guiding the stretcher through the emergency entrance with practiced urgency. I followed behind them, my steps unsteady, my mind still struggling to understand that my son, who I believed had died 3 years earlier, was alive. The hospital corridors blurred together. as we moved quickly beneath rows of bright fluorescent lights. Nurses passed in hurried motion, monitors beeped somewhere down the hall, and voices echoed from distant rooms. When we reached the ICU entrance, a nurse stepped gently into my path. "Family waits here, sir," she said kindly. "The doctors will come speak with you as soon as they can." I nodded slowly, though. I barely understood the words. My legs felt hollow as I walked to the waiting area. I sank into a hard plastic chair and stared at the floor. My hands trembled uncontrollably. When I finally looked at the wall clock, it was a little after noon. It felt like an entire lifetime had passed since I woke up that morning to a broken air conditioner. 2 hours later, a doctor approached me. She introduced herself as Dr. Warren. She appeared to be in her 50s with streaks of gray in her hair, and the steady composure of someone who had spent many years delivering both good and terrible news. She carried a tablet in her hand and sat beside me. "Mr. Hargrove," she said gently, "your son is stable." The tension in my chest loosened slightly. "But we've completed some initial tests," she continued, "and I want to be completely honest about what we found." I nodded slowly. Owen's carboxyhemoglobin level, the amount of carbon monoxide in his bloodstream, was 43% when he arrived. She paused before continuing. "Anything above 40% is considered immediately life-threatening. If he had been discovered even a few hours later, the outcome would likely have been very different." My throat tightened. "We have already begun hyperbaric oxygen therapy," she continued. "He will spend several hours inside a pressurized oxygen chamber. The treatment helps remove carbon monoxide from the bloodstream much faster." "How long?" I asked quietly. "At least 6 hours." I swallowed hard. "Will he recover, doctor?" Warren's expression softened. "With time, we believe he will recover physically." She tapped the tablet gently. "Your son has lost 62 pounds. He's severely malnourished and dehydrated. We're also seeing significant muscle atrophy from prolonged confinement." She hesitated before adding, "There's also the possibility of neurological damage caused by extended oxygen deprivation. We won't know the full extent until he regains strength and we can perform cognitive tests." She met my eyes directly. "But, Mr. Hargrove, your son is remarkably strong. The fact that he survived this long under those conditions is extraordinary." I pressed my hands against my face and tried to steady myself. "Can I see him?" I asked. "When his treatment is finished," she replied. "Yes." The next 6 hours stretched longer than anything I had ever experienced. Every minute felt like 10. I sat alone in the waiting room, replaying the morning in my mind again and again. The attic, the locks, the door opening, the sound of Owen's voice. When a nurse finally appeared and said I could come with her, my legs nearly gave out again. She led me through another hallway and into a quiet room. When I stepped inside, I froze in the doorway. Owen lay propped slightly upright in the hospital bed. Clear oxygen tubing rested beneath his nose. 4 lines ran from both arms and several monitors blinked softly beside him. His face was still gaunt, but his eyes were open, and they were looking directly at me. "Dad," he whispered. The word nearly broke me. I crossed the room quickly and dropped into the chair beside the bed. I reached for his hand. It felt warmer than before. "I'm here," I said quietly. "I'm right here." Tears slid down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he whispered weakly. "I'm so sorry." "You don't need to apologize," I said immediately. "This wasn't your fault." Owen closed his eyes briefly as if gathering strength. When he spoke again, his voice was slow and fragile. "I need to tell you what happened, before I forget." I squeezed his hand gently. "Take your time," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded faintly. "July 2020, he began. Sarah, my wife, she was 8 months pregnant. The doctors discovered complications. She needed an emergency procedure, but our insurance refused to cover it. His breathing grew uneven. We needed $10,000 immediately." He swallowed before continuing. "I flew here to ask for help. I didn't call first. I thought if you saw me in person, you'd understand how serious it was. I arrived late that night, around 11. Garrett answered the door. Owen paused. "He said you were already asleep. He told me to wait until morning." Owen's voice dropped. He offered me a glass of water. I drank it. And then, everything went black. My chest tightened painfully. "He drugged you," I said quietly. Owen nodded weakly. "When I woke up, I was in that room in the attic. Garrett came in later. He stood in the doorway and told me I came here to take what belonged to him." Owen's voice trembled. He said, "You had money, property, everything he and Jessica deserved. He told me if I screamed or tried to warn you, he would hurt you. He said he would do it in a way no one would ever question. Owen looked at me, and I believed him. He used me to threaten you, I said softly. Owen nodded. Every day he came once. Just once. He slid food through a slot in the door, a bowl of something, a bottle of water. There was a bucket in the corner. He closed his eyes briefly. No window, no light except when he opened the door. I tried to break the door at first. I kicked it, slammed my body against it, tried to pry the hinges loose. Nothing worked. I screamed until my throat was raw. Owen's voice cracked, but Garrett would turn music on downstairs, loud. And whenever you heard anything, Jessica told you it was mice, or pipes, or the house settling. I felt a deep coldness inside my chest. She knew I said quietly. She knew the whole time. Owen's eyes filled with tears. After the first year, he whispered, I stopped trying. I just gave up. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the quiet room. Owen continued slowly. 2 months ago, something changed. I started waking up with horrible headaches. I felt dizzy all the time. My chest hurt. I didn't understand what was happening. His eyes met mine, until Garrett told me. Owen's voice trembled. He came into the room one day and said something strange. He said, "You know what's funny?" Owen swallowed. "I've done this before." He said he did it to Linda. My heart stopped. 2019, Owen whispered. He rerouted carbon monoxide from the heating system into her bedroom. He said it took 6 months, but no one ever suspected anything. Owen's voice cracked. He laughed, Dad. He actually laughed. Owen's eyes filled with pain. And then he said, Owen struggled to finish the sentence. This time, I'm doing it to both of you. The old man downstairs, and you. When you're both gone, everything goes to Jessica. And I finally get what I deserve. The air disappeared from my lungs. Linda, my wife. Garrett hadn't only imprisoned my son, he had murdered my wife, and I had trusted him. Owen coughed suddenly, and a nurse stepped in quickly to check the monitors. He needs rest, she said gently. I nodded, but kept holding his hand. Owen looked at me with exhausted eyes. Dad, I thought I was going to die in that room. I thought you'd never know what happened. I thought Sarah would think I abandoned her. You're safe now, I said quietly. Sarah will know the truth. And Garrett, my voice hardened. Garrett will answer for everything he's done. Owen closed his eyes slowly. He said he'd get away with it, he whispered. That he always does. I leaned closer and spoke firmly. Not this time. Detective Santos arrived just as the sun dipped toward the Phoenix skyline, its orange light spilling through the window of Owen's hospital room. Her silhouette appeared first in the doorway before she stepped fully inside. She was a compact woman in her early 40s, her dark hair pulled tightly into a severe bun. A charcoal blazer hung neatly over her shoulders, and a police badge rested on a lanyard around her neck. Mr. Hargrove, she said in a calm but direct voice. I'm Detective Elena Santos with the Phoenix Police Department. Her eyes shifted briefly to Owen. I need to take your son's formal statement if he's able. She glanced at the monitors beside Owen's bed, studying the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. I understand this isn't the easiest moment, she added carefully, but the sooner we document everything, the stronger the case will be. Owen shifted slightly against the hospital pillows. His face still looked pale and drawn, but he nodded. I can do it, he said weakly. I started to rise from my chair, thinking perhaps I should step outside, but Santos raised a hand gently. You're welcome to stay, Mr. Hargrove, she said. In fact, I'll need to speak with you as well. She pulled a chair beside the hospital bed and placed a small leather notebook and a recording device on the side table. After pressing the record button, she leaned forward slightly. This conversation is being recorded for accuracy, she explained. Her eyes returned to Owen. Owen, can you confirm your full name and date of birth for the record? Owen cleared his throat. Owen James Hargrove, he said slowly. April 12th, 1988. Santos nodded and made a note. And can you confirm that Garrett Vance held you against your will from July of 2020 until today? July 15th, 2023, Owen swallowed before answering. Yes. What followed was a long series of questions. Santos asked them carefully and methodically, one after another. Owen answered as best he could, though his voice sometimes faded and his breathing occasionally faltered. She paused often to give him time to recover. The room remained quiet except for Owen's hoarse voice and the steady electronic beeping of the heart monitor beside him. Eventually, Santos closed her notebook. She turned her attention to me. "Mr. Hargrove," she said gently, "I'd like to explain what our investigators have discovered at the house so far. Our forensic team has been processing the property since early this morning." She removed a tablet from her bag and tapped the screen. The first significant discovery was Garrett Vance's laptop in the home office. She turned the tablet toward me. The screen displayed what looked like a familiar news website, but something about it made my stomach tighten. The headline read, "7 workers lost in offshore rig explosion, Alaska." I stared at it, my pulse suddenly pounding. Owen's name appeared among the listed victims. "This site is fake," Santos said quietly. "If you look at the web address, it isn't the legitimate news domain. It's cnnnews.info, not cnn.com. She zoomed in on the address bar. Garrett created at least 3 different versions of these pages, each designed to mimic real news organizations. They all reported the same fictional explosion. She looked directly at me. "He emailed the links to you in July of 2020. My hands began trembling. I remembered that day vividly. I remembered opening the email, reading the article, and feeling the world collapse around me. "You're saying he built these himself?" I asked hoarsely. "Yes." Santos tapped the screen again. "We found web design software on his laptop along with saved drafts of the articles. He spent several weeks constructing them." My chest tightened. I had mourned my son. I had believed he was dead because of lies carefully crafted on Garrett's computer. Santos continued. "Our forensic team also examined the HVAC system in the attic. The technician Ryan Brennan was correct in his initial assessment." She pulled up another photograph. The image showed the damaged furnace component clearly. "Someone deliberately sabotaged the heat exchanger," she explained. Several holes were drilled directly into the metal. She pointed to the ductwork on the screen. The ventilation dampers were also manually adjusted to direct the carbon monoxide into 2 specific areas. She looked at me. "Your bedroom downstairs and the locked attic room where Owen was being held." A wave of nausea rolled through me. "This wasn't an accident," she said firmly. "It was intentional." I swallowed hard. How long had it been running? Based on furnace data logs and the wear patterns on the damaged metal. Santos replied, "We believe the system began operating this way in early May." She paused. "It has been cycling regularly for approximately 2.5 months. Her eyes sharpened slightly. "During that time, did you experience symptoms such as headaches, dizziness, or unusual fatigue?" I nodded slowly. "All of those," I said quietly. "I assumed it was age." Santos shook her head. "It wasn't age," she said bluntly. "You were suffering from carbon monoxide exposure." She folded her arms. "Mr. Brennan's decision to investigate the attic likely saved your life." Her voice softened slightly. "If you had waited another week before calling a repair technician, both you and Owen likely would have died." I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady myself. "There's another matter we need to address," Santos continued. "Your daughter." I opened my eyes again. "Jessica." Santos nodded. "She was arrested this afternoon at Tucson International Airport." The words hung in the air. She was attempting to board a flight to Los Angeles. My stomach sank. "Based on the recorded phone conversation Mr. Brennan provided, we had probable cause to detain her." Santos explained. "She is currently being held at the Pima County Jail and will be transferred to Phoenix for questioning." "She was leaving," I murmured. "It appears that way," Santos replied. "Whether she intended to flee or simply travel temporarily is something we'll determine during questioning." She looked at me carefully. "However, based on her statements during your phone call this morning, telling you not to open the door and insisting you wait for Garrett, she may face charges as an accessory to false imprisonment." My hands tightened together. She knew, I said quietly. She knew Owen was there. Santos did not soften her words. "Yes," she said, "she did." The room fell silent again. Owen lay quietly in the hospital bed, while the steady rhythm of the monitor filled the space. Santos stood and slid the tablet back into her bag. "Our investigation is continuing," she said. "Garrett Vance is currently in Houston, but a warrant has already been issued for his arrest." She adjusted the strap of her bag. "The U.S. Marshal Service is coordinating with Texas authorities. We expect him to be in custody soon." "Good," I said quietly. Santos paused at the doorway. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, "I know this situation is overwhelming. If you need assistance, victim services, counseling, legal guidance, please let us know." "Thank you," I said. She gave a small nod and stepped out into the hallway. Owen shifted slightly in his bed. His eyes found mine. "Dad, are you okay?" The question almost made me laugh. He had endured 3 years in a locked room, yet he was worried about me. I reached over and gently squeezed his hand. "I will be," I said softly, "once this is all finished." But even as I said the words, I knew something else still remained unfinished. I looked at Owen. "I need to see Jessica." He didn't argue. He only nodded slowly. "I understand." I stood carefully and walked into the hallway. Detective Santos was speaking quietly with another officer nearby. She turned when she saw me approaching. "Detective," I said, "I need to see my daughter. Can you arrange that?" Santos studied my face for several seconds. Finally, she nodded. "I'll make the arrangements." Then her expression grew serious. "But Mr. Hargrove, you should prepare yourself. She isn't in a good mental state." She paused. "And whatever she tells you," her voice lowered slightly, "it may not be what you want to hear." I nodded slowly. "I know," I said, "but I need to hear it anyway." 2 days after Owen regained consciousness, I found myself standing outside the headquarters of the Phoenix Police Department. Staring at the tall glass doors as if stepping through them might change everything. For several minutes, I simply stood there. I had driven alone, even though Detective Santos had offered to send an officer to pick me up. I declined. I needed the quiet drive across the city. I needed time to prepare myself for what I was about to face, because inside that building was my daughter, and I no longer knew who she truly was. When I finally pushed through the doors, the lobby greeted me with the sharp smell of industrial cleaning solution mixed with stale coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed faintly, casting a cold glow across the tiled floor. Detective Santos was waiting near the security desk. She stepped forward when she saw me. "Mr. Hargrove," she said calmly, "are you certain you're ready for this?" I nodded, though the truth was far more complicated. I wasn't ready for anything anymore, but I had to do this. Santos led me past the reception desk and through a series of long, narrow hallways that all looked the same: gray walls, sealed doors, the distant echo of voices behind them. Eventually, we stopped outside a plain metal door with a sign that read, "Interview Room 3. Santos turned toward me, lowering her voice. "She's been here since yesterday," she said. "She's fragile." She studied my expression carefully. "I'll remain inside the room, but this is your conversation. If you need to stop at any point, just tell me." "I won't need to stop," I replied quietly. Santos gave a small nod. Then she opened the door. The room was small and sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel colder than it already was. A metal table sat in the center, bolted firmly to the floor. 2 chairs faced each other across it. Jessica sat in one of them. Her wrists were cuffed together in front of her, the chain resting on the tabletop. When she saw me step into the room, her entire body seemed to collapse inward. "Dad," she whispered. The word broke into a sob before she could finish it. Tears streamed down her face. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." I walked slowly to the chair opposite her and sat down. Detective Santos moved quietly to the wall near the door, observing but saying nothing. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I simply looked at Jessica. Her hair was tangled and unwashed. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her skin looked pale and hollow, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked nothing like the daughter I remembered. "Dad," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "Please, say something." I leaned back in the chair, forcing my voice to remain calm. "Did you know Owen was locked in the attic for 3 years?" The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She flinched. Her eyes dropped to the metal tabletop. "Yes," she whispered. I knew. The room felt colder. "And you said nothing?" I replied. "I couldn't." "You couldn't?" I cut in sharply. My voice rose despite myself. "You couldn't pick up a phone, couldn't call the police, couldn't tell your own father that your brother was being held prisoner, 15 feet above his head. Dad, you don't understand?" "Then help me understand," I said, leaning forward. "Explain to me how you allowed your brother to rot in that room while you lived downstairs and looked me in the eye every day." Jessica's shoulders began shaking. Tears poured down her cheeks. "Garrett told me it was temporary," she cried. "He said Owen showed up trying to manipulate you, trying to take money that didn't belong to him." She wiped her face helplessly. "He said he just needed to keep Owen out of the way for a little while. A few weeks, he said. I thought he would let Owen go." I stared at her. And when those weeks turned into months, I asked quietly, "When did you decide to do something?" Her face crumpled. I was afraid she whispered. "Afraid of what, Garrett?" The word burst from her. "He told me if I told anyone, if I called the police, he would hurt you." Her voice trembled. He said he would hurt Emma too. She took a shaking breath. He said he would make it look like an accident. I didn't know what to do. I watched her carefully. So, you protected yourself, I said, and Emma. And you allowed Owen to suffer. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, I replied coldly. You chose to lie. You chose to protect Garrett. You chose to tell me the noises in the attic were mice. You chose to pretend everything was normal while your brother starved above our heads. Jessica broke down completely, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. I know she cried. I know I was wrong. I know I'm a coward. She looked up at me desperately. But Dad, please believe me. I love you. I love Owen. Garrett lied to me from the beginning. He made Owen sound like the enemy, and I believed him. Her voice collapsed into a whisper. I was so stupid. Detective Santos stepped forward slightly. Jessica, she said firmly, did you help Garrett create the fake news articles about Owen's supposed death? Jessica looked up quickly. No, she said immediately. I swear I didn't know anything about those. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I didn't even know they existed until yesterday when the detectives showed me the evidence. Santos wrote something in her notebook. But you did help Garrett keep Edmund away from the attic, she said. You repeatedly told your father that the noises he heard were nothing. That makes you an accomplice in the false imprisonment. Jessica's face turned pale. I never thought of it like that, she whispered. I was just doing what Garrett told me. Because you were afraid of him, Santos asked. Yes, Jessica said quietly. I was terrified of what he would do if I disobeyed him. I studied her face, searching for something familiar, some trace of the daughter I once knew. But all I saw was someone different, a stranger, a woman who chose fear over courage, silence over truth. I slowly pushed my chair back and stood. Dad, wait, Jessica cried. She stretched her cuffed hands toward me as far as the chain allowed. Please don't leave. I looked down at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger, no love, only emptiness. You're right about one thing, Jessica, I said quietly. You are a coward, her face twisted in pain. Dad, please. I turned toward Santos. Where is Garrett? Santos's expression darkened. We don't know, she said. After Jessica was taken into custody, someone must have warned him. He was scheduled to return from Houston yesterday, but he never arrived. She crossed her arms. His phone is turned off and his credit cards have not been used. A warrant has been issued for his arrest, and the U.S. Marshal Service is actively searching for him. But right now, she paused. He's disappeared. So he's running, I said. It appears that way. I glanced back at Jessica one last time. She had collapsed into her chair, crying into her cuffed hands. For a moment, something stirred inside me. Not forgiveness. Not anger, just grief. Grief for the daughter I had lost. But it wasn't enough to make me stay. I walked toward the door. Detective Santos followed. Jessica's sobs echoed behind us as the door closed. Out in the hallway, I leaned briefly against the wall. Santos studied me. Are you all right, Mr. Hargrove? No, I said, honestly. But I will be. My voice hardened. Once Garrett is caught, Santos nodded. We will find him, I promise. I hoped she was right, because Garrett Vance had taken everything from me. My wife, my son's freedom, my daughter's conscience, and the life I thought I understood, and I wasn't going to rest until he answered for every single one of those crimes. 5 days passed, but they did not feel like days. They felt like entire years compressed into sleepless hours. I barely left the hospital. Most nights I slept in the stiff chair beside Owen's bed, though sleep was too generous a word. Exhaustion would drag me under for an hour or two, and then I would wake again to the soft beeping of machines, the quiet footsteps of nurses checking monitors, or the rustle of hospital curtains. Every time I opened my eyes, I looked immediately at Owen, just to make sure he was still breathing. He was getting stronger, slowly, painfully, but he was alive. That was the only thing that mattered. Dr. Warren visited every morning during her rounds. Her voice always carried the same calm caution. His oxygen levels are stabilizing, she told me on the 3rd day. She folded her hands thoughtfully. But, Mr. Hargrove, I want to be honest with you. I braced myself. Even with excellent care, she continued. Owen is looking at least 6 months of recovery. She paused, possibly longer. I nodded quietly. There is still a possibility of permanent neurological damage, she added. Prolonged oxygen deprivation can affect memory coordination and cognitive function. She gave a sympathetic look. We won't know the full impact until he is strong enough for neurological testing. I nodded again, though I barely heard the rest of her words. My thoughts were somewhere else entirely. They were with Garrett. He had vanished the moment Jessica was arrested, like smoke slipping through a closing hand. Detective Santos called every evening with updates. For the first few days, there were none. Nationwide warrant has been issued, she told me during the second night. His credit cards haven't been used. His phone is powered off. We're coordinating with the U.S. Marshals and the FBI. Her voice remained steady. He can't hide forever. But each day that passed without news made the knot in my chest tighten. Garrett was out there somewhere, free. Meanwhile, Owen lay in a hospital bed, fighting to recover from 3 years of imprisonment and months of poisoning. It felt wrong. It felt unfinished. On the fourth day, I sat beside Owen's bed while he slept. His face had regained a little color. The gray tone that had haunted his skin was fading. The tremors that had shaken his body during the first 2 days had finally eased. But he still looked fragile, as if the wrong breath of wind might carry him away. I reached out and gently took his hand. "I'm still here, son," I whispered quietly. "And I'm not leaving until this is finished." His fingers twitched weakly in mine. After a moment, his eyes fluttered open. "Dad," he rasped. The word barely made it past his lips. "Did they find him?" I hesitated before answering. "Not yet," I admitted. "But they will." Owen closed his eyes again. "I'm scared he'll get away." "He won't," I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. "You focus on getting stronger," I added softly. "Let me worry about Garrett." That night's sleep refused to come. I walked the hospital corridors for hours, pacing beneath the humming lights. My phone never left my hand. I kept waiting for it to ring, waiting for Santos to tell me they had found him, waiting for something to break the suffocating tension. The call finally came the next morning. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, forcing down coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. My phone buzzed. Detective Santos's name appeared on the screen. I answered before the second ring. "Did you find him?" "We may have a lead," she said. Her voice carried a controlled urgency. "Garrett's phone pinged about an hour ago, near Nogales. That's a border town, south of Tucson." I stood so quickly my chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Is he still there?" "We've alerted Border Patrol." Santos continued. "They're setting checkpoints at every crossing. If he attempts to cross into Mexico, he won't make it through. U.S. Marshals are heading there as well." "I'm coming," I said immediately. "Mr. Hargrove, I'm coming," I repeated. "I need to see this." There was a brief pause on the line, then Santos exhaled. "All right, but stay back. Let us handle it." I didn't waste another second. I told the nurse at Owen's station where I was going and left a note beside his bed in case he woke up. Then I drove south. Nogales was nearly 90 miles away, but I made the drive in less than 90 minutes. The entire time, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. By the time I reached the border checkpoint, the Arizona sun was blazing overhead. The heat made the asphalt shimmer like water. Law enforcement vehicles filled the area, Border Patrol SUVs, unmarked FBI cars. Federal agents stood in clusters, speaking into radios. Detective Santos stood near a group of officers, her arms crossed, while she listened to a transmission. She noticed my car immediately. As I stepped out, she walked toward me. "He's in custody," she said before I could ask. Border Patrol had intercepted him 20 minutes earlier. He tried crossing through the pedestrian checkpoint with a fake ID. The breath left my lungs slowly. "Where is he?" Santos gestured toward a fenced holding area near the checkpoint. A man sat on a bench inside. His wrists were cuffed behind his back. Even from a distance, I recognized him instantly. Garrett. His head hung low, his shoulders slumped, but there was no mistaking him. "Can I speak to him?" I asked. Santos shook her head firmly. "No. He's being processed right now. Once that's done, he'll be transferred to the Pima County Jail in Tucson. From there, he'll be extradited to Phoenix. You'll see him again, in court, but not here." I kept watching Garrett. The man looked small, pathetic, nothing like the confident son-in-law who had once shared my breakfast table, nothing like the man who called me dad, nothing like the man who locked my son in an attic and murdered my wife. "He almost made it," I said quietly. "If you had been 10 minutes later." "But we weren't," Santos replied. "He's finished running." I wanted to believe her. But as I watched Garrett sitting there in handcuffs, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished yet. Santos's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. "Mr. Hargrove," she said. "There's another matter we need to discuss. Our financial investigators have been reviewing Garrett's records. She looked back at me. And they've uncovered something significant. I turned away from the holding area. What is it? A very large amount of debt, she said. The kind of debt that can push someone toward desperate choices. We returned to her vehicle and began driving north toward Phoenix. During the ride, Santos explained what her team had uncovered. Credit card balances, personal loans, hidden bank transfers, payments sent to accounts that appeared to belong to underground lenders. By the time the Phoenix skyline appeared again in the distance, the picture was clear. Garrett hadn't only been cruel, he had been drowning. And when desperation mixes with greed, it can turn a man into something far more dangerous than anyone expects. Into a monster. Santos's office was a cramped space on the third floor of the Phoenix Police Department, crammed with filing cabinets and stacks of case folders. She gestured for me to sit, then opened her laptop and turned it toward me. Spreadsheets, rows of numbers, dates, transactions. My stomach tightened. Mr. Hargrove, I want to walk you through what we found when we dug into Garrett Vance's financial history. She clicked through several tabs. This is going to be difficult to hear, but it's important you understand exactly why he did what he did. I nodded, bracing myself. She pulled up a document, a loan agreement. Garrett borrowed money from an organization called Kozlov Capital. We believe it's a front for an illegal lending operation. Loan sharks who target individuals with poor credit or gambling problems. Gambling. I repeated the word, tasting bitter. Yes, online poker sports betting. We traced his accounts back to 2021. In the first 6 months alone, he lost over $40,000. She scrolled down, showing me transaction after transaction. When he ran out of his own money, he turned to Kozlov. They lent him $50,000 initially. The terms were brutal interest rates around 25% per month compounding. When he couldn't make payments, the debt ballooned. She clicked to another page, a timeline. I watched the numbers climb 60,000, 80,000, 120,000. By 2023, the figure had reached $380,000. I stared at the screen, unable to process the enormity of it. Santos opened an email folder, messages from anonymous sender addresses. She scrolled through them. Friendly reminder, payment overdue, final notice, and then dated May 10th, 2023, last chance. She clicked it open. The message was short. You have 30 days. Pay or consequences. We know where your family lives. I felt my hands curl into fists. They threatened Jessica, Emma. Yes, and Garrett panicked. Santos pulled up a calendar marking dates with red highlights. May 2023. The same month he received this threat is when the furnace in your daughter's attic was sabotaged. The carbon monoxide poisoning began exactly 2 weeks after this email. The pieces clicked into place. He needed money fast, and the only way to get it was, your estate, Santos finished. We estimate your total assets at around $8 million. Under Arizona law, if you passed away without a will, your estate would be divided among your surviving children. Owen was supposed to be gone. That left Jessica as the sole heir. And Garrett controlled Jessica. Santos nodded. We found joint bank accounts, credit cards in both their names. If you had passed away, Jessica would have inherited everything, and Garrett would have had access to it. I leaned back, feeling the weight settle over me like a suffocating blanket. So when Owen showed up in July 2020, Garrett saw him as a threat. If Owen was alive, the inheritance would be split 50-50. Garrett couldn't risk that, so he imprisoned him. She pulled up another document. Initially, we think Garrett planned to keep Owen locked up until you passed away naturally. Once you were gone and Jessica inherited, Garrett could have dealt with Owen however he wanted. But he didn't wait, I said, my voice hollow. No, because in May 2023, Kozlov gave him a deadline, 30 days. Garrett couldn't wait for you to pass away on your own. He needed the money immediately, so he escalated. He started poisoning you both slowly enough that it wouldn't raise immediate suspicion, but fast enough that he hoped you'd both be gone within weeks. I pressed my palms against my eyes. Linda's headaches, Owen's 3 years of hell, my own dizziness, the fatigue I'd blamed on age. All of it deliberate, all of it calculated. He was going to end us both, for money. For money and to save himself from Kozlov. Santos closed the laptop. Mr. Hargrove Garrett Vance is a man who was in over his head, but that doesn't excuse what he did. It explains it. And it gives us a clear motive for prosecution. I looked up at her. What happens to Garrett now? He'll be arraigned in Phoenix within the week. The charges are extensive false imprisonment, attempted harm, fraud, conspiracy. With the evidence we have, he's looking at life in prison without the possibility of release." She paused. "There's one more thing." I waited, feeling fresh dread. Santos reached for a physical file and opened it. She slid a sheet of paper across the desk to me. It was a court order. I scanned the text, catching phrases like exhumation authorized and forensic examination. "What is this?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Mr. Hargrove, based on Owen's testimony, specifically Garrett's confession about your wife, we obtained permission to exhume Linda's remains." The room seemed to tilt. "You dug up my wife." "We had to. If Garrett poisoned her the same way he tried to poison you and Owen, there would be traces in her tissue. Hair bone even after 4 years. We needed to confirm." And my voice barely worked. Santos met my eyes, her expression somber. "We'll have the results within 48 hours. But Mr. Hargrove, if Garrett did what Owen said he did, we'll be adding another charge to his case. And your wife's passing won't remain listed as heart failure. It'll be reclassified." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Linda, my Linda, who'd complained of headaches and exhaustion, who'd trusted Garrett to fix the air conditioning, who'd gone to sleep one night and never woken up. She'd been taken from me, and I'd never known. Santos stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry. I know this is unbearable, but the confirmation will give you closure, and it'll ensure Garrett answers for everything he's done." I nodded numbly, staring at the court order. 48 hours. In 2 days I'd know for certain. "Thank you," I managed. Santos squeezed my shoulder. "We'll call you as soon as the results come in. In the meantime, go be with your son. He needs you." I left the station in a daze, the court order folded in my pocket. The city was bright and hot, but I felt cold, hollow. By the time I reached my car, I realized I was shaking, not from fear, from rage. Garrett Vance had taken everything, and now I was going to make sure he paid for it. A week later, I found myself standing at the edge of Desert View Cemetery beneath a sky so intensely blue it almost hurt to look at. The Arizona sun blazed overhead, casting harsh light across rows of granite headstones that stretched quietly into the distance. The brightness made the pale stone glow like bleached bone. Linda's grave rested near the far end of the cemetery beneath a mesquite tree, whose thin branches offered little protection from the heat. I had chosen that spot 4 years earlier because it seemed peaceful, quiet, a place where the desert wind whispered softly through the leaves. Now it felt different. Now it felt like the beginning of a crime scene. The forensic team moved carefully around the gravesite. Men and women dressed in white protective suits worked with deliberate precision, speaking quietly as they handled their equipment. Their movements were calm, methodical, professional. I stood back about 50 feet away. My hands were buried deep in my pockets as if keeping them there might stop them from trembling. Detective Santos stood beside me, silent. Earlier she had asked if I wanted to leave. I told her no. I owed Linda this. I owed her the dignity of being present even for this. The process did not take long. The grave was opened with care, each step documented by the forensic team. Eventually, the casket was lifted slowly from the earth and placed onto a transport platform. The team secured it carefully before loading it onto a vehicle that would carry it to the medical examiner's lab. I didn't look. I didn't want to see her like that. The Linda I wanted to remember was not inside a coffin. The Linda I remembered laughed at terrible jokes. She planted tomatoes in our backyard every spring. She squeezed my hand during movies and whispered comments when the ending surprised her. That was the Linda I wanted to keep. 2 days later, I was sitting beside Owen's hospital bed again. The evening sun was fading beyond the window, painting the city skyline in warm gold and orange. The room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of medical monitors. Owen was resting, his breathing slow and even. My phone vibrated in my hand. "Detective Santos," I answered immediately. "Mr. Hargrove," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. "The lab results have come back." My chest tightened. "Tell me." "There are elevated carbon monoxide levels present in Linda's hair and bone samples," Santos explained carefully. "The pattern shows prolonged exposure over approximately 6 months during 2019. She paused briefly. "The concentrations are consistent with chronic low-level poisoning." Exactly what had been discovered in both Owen and me. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Mr. Hargrove," she continued gently, "your wife was slowly poisoned." The words landed like stones. Over the course of roughly half a year, my legs felt suddenly weak. I gripped the armrest of the chair to steady myself. Owen had opened his eyes and was watching me carefully. How? I asked quietly. We believe Garrett sabotaged your home's HVAC system in 2019, Santos explained. He drilled small holes into the furnace heat exchanger and redirected carbon monoxide through the duct system directly into Linda's bedroom. She exhaled slowly. The exposure levels would have been extremely difficult to detect. I closed my eyes. Symptoms like headaches, fatigue, dizziness. Santos continued. Those are common with slow CO exposure. Over time, it weakens the body, and eventually the concentration spikes. Her voice softened. Linda died in her sleep. The medical examiner ruled it heart failure, which is unfortunately common in severe carbon monoxide poisoning cases when CO isn't specifically tested. I felt memories rushing back. Linda rubbing her temples, the endless doctor appointments, the exhaustion she couldn't explain, and Garrett visiting our house, Garrett offering to check the air conditioner, Garrett asking how Linda had been feeling. He was checking on her, I whispered, making sure it was working. Yes, Santos said quietly. He was monitoring the poisoning. My chest tightened painfully. Why I asked, why Linda Santos spoke carefully. We believe it was preparation, she continued. Garrett married Jessica in 2018. At that time, our financial investigation shows he was already carrying heavy debt. She paused. If Linda passed away, you would be alone, more vulnerable. He could position himself as the devoted son-in-law. She let the idea settle before finishing. And by killing Linda first, he learned how to use carbon monoxide effectively. My stomach twisted. He was practicing? I whispered. Yes. He perfected the method. I pressed a hand against my face. I let him practice on my wife. The words tasted bitter. I invited him into our home. I thanked him for fixing the air conditioning. Santos spoke gently. Mr. Hargrove, you could not have known. Garrett is highly manipulative. He fooled doctors, neighbors, investigators, and even the initial police inquiry. You are not responsible for this. But guilt doesn't listen to logic. I had watched Linda grow weaker for 6 months, and I believed it was stress, or age, or exhaustion. I had slept beside her the night she died, and never suspected the truth. Mr. Hargrove, Santos asked softly, "Are you still there?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm here." "There's one more update," she continued. "With this new evidence, the prosecutor has amended Garrett Vance's charges." I listened carefully. He will now face 3 separate counts of attempted homicide, one for Linda, one for you, and one for Owen, she continued. Combined with the charges of kidnapping and false imprisonment, the sentencing exposure is severe, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The district attorney believes the evidence is extremely strong. Good, I said quietly. It was the only word that came out. Santos waited a moment before speaking again. I know this cannot bring Linda back, but her death will no longer be recorded as natural. She will be recognized as a victim, and Garrett will be held accountable. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. Take care of yourself, Mr. Hargrove, she replied, and take care of Owen. The call ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the silent phone in my hand. Owen looked at me anxiously. Dad. His voice was fragile. Was it him? My throat tightened. Yes. My voice broke slightly. It was him. Owen closed his eyes, and tears slipped down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault, I told him. But the words felt empty, because someone was responsible, and that man was sitting in a jail cell waiting for trial. I stood slowly and walked to the hospital window. The city lights were beginning to appear across Phoenix as evening settled over the desert. Somewhere in that city, Garrett Vance was locked inside a concrete cell. Perhaps he believed he could manipulate his way out of this, but he couldn't. Not anymore. Linda was gone. But the truth about her death would not remain buried under lies, and Garrett would spend the rest of his life paying for what he had done. I stood there quietly and made a promise. I would see this through to the end. I would sit in that courtroom. I would look Garrett Vance in the eye, and I would watch him lose everything. For Linda, for Owen, for all of us. The call came on a quiet Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after Garrett had been taken into custody. I was standing in the small kitchenette of the extended stay hotel where I had been living since everything began. I couldn't bring myself to return to the house that once belonged to Jessica and Garrett. Too many memories lingered there, too many lies hidden behind ordinary walls. The coffee machine sputtered softly as it filled the pot. The room smelled faintly of cheap hotel soap and burnt coffee. My phone buzzed against the counter. Unknown number. Normally I ignored calls like that, but something in my gut told me to answer. Mr. Hargrove. The voice on the other end was male, calm, controlled. There was a slight accent I couldn't quite identify. Your son-in-law owes us $380,000. I froze. The coffee pot hung in my hand, halfway lifted. Who is this? I asked slowly. That isn't important, the man replied. What matters is that Garrett Vance cannot repay what he owes. He spoke as if explaining something simple. He is currently in custody. His assets have been frozen, which means the debt transfers to his family. There was a pause. To you. My jaw tightened. I don't owe you anything, I said sharply. You will, the voice answered calmly. You have 7 days to arrange payment, and if I don't, I asked. Another brief pause. Then there will be consequences. The man's voice grew colder. We know where you are, Mr. Hargrove. We know where your son is. My heart pounded. St. Joseph's Hospital, he continued. Room 314. He's recovering well, I hear. A thin silence followed. It would be unfortunate if something interfered with that recovery. The call ended. I set the phone down very slowly. My hands were trembling. Then I called Detective Santos. She answered almost immediately. Mr. Hargrove. What's wrong? I repeated the conversation word for word. When I finished, she remained silent for several seconds. That's Kozlov, she said finally. We've been investigating that group. The FBI is involved now. Kozlov Capital appears to be connected to a much larger organized crime operation. I rubbed my forehead. They threatened Owen. I know, she replied. Mr. Hargrove, they may attempt to approach you in person. If anyone comes near you, do not engage. Call 911 immediately. What about Owen? I asked. They mentioned the hospital. I'm placing officers outside his room, Santos said firmly. But the FBI wants to use this situation. What do you mean? If Kozlov's people come looking for you? She explained, it gives federal agents an opportunity to arrest them. I didn't like the idea, not even a little, but I had no alternative. Owen will be protected, she added. Fine, I said reluctantly. But if anything happens to him, it won't, Santos interrupted firmly. I promise. I ended the call and left the hotel immediately. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. When I entered Owen's room, he was sitting upright in bed. He looked better than he had in days, still thin, still weak, but alive. He smiled when he saw me. Hey, Dad, you're early today. Yeah, I said quietly. I pulled a chair beside his bed. How are you feeling? Tired, he said. But better. He studied my face carefully. What's wrong? I couldn't lie. There's been a complication. His smile faded. What kind of complication? Garrett owed money to some very dangerous people, I explained. They called me this morning. Owen's face tightened. They might come here. What do you mean, come here? He asked. The police know, I said quickly. There will be officers outside your room. FBI agents too. You're safe. Owen nodded slowly, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes again. Dad, I don't want to go through this again. You won't, I said firmly. I squeezed his hand. I won't let anything happen to you. Around mid-afternoon, the hallway outside the room grew unusually quiet. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. 2 men appeared in the doorway. One was tall, at least 6'2", with broad shoulders and a black jacket. The second man was shorter, but thicker, with a hard expression and cold eyes. The tall one stepped inside first. Mr. Hargrove. His voice was calm. We spoke earlier today. You didn't seem to take our warning seriously. I stood immediately, placing myself between them and Owen. Leave, I said. Now. We're not here to hurt anyone, the tall man replied smoothly. We're simply reminding you of your responsibility. Garrett Vance owes our organization money, and that debt must be repaid. I told you already, I said. I owe you nothing. The tall man moved 1 step closer to Owen's bed. Your son appears very fragile, he said quietly. It would be unfortunate if something interrupted his recovery. Owen shrank back against the pillows. Rage surged through me. I slammed my hand onto the nurse call button. You need to leave, I said. Right now. The hospital door exploded open. 2 men in dark suits rushed inside, badges already raised. FBI, one of them shouted. Step away from the bed. Hands where we can see them. Everything happened fast after that. The tall man froze instantly. The shorter one tried to bolt for the hallway. He didn't get far. One of the agents grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back. Within seconds, he was slammed face down onto the floor. Metal cuffs snapped around his wrists. "On your knees," the first agent ordered. The tall man obeyed slowly. Within moments, both men were restrained and escorted from the room. The entire encounter had lasted less than a minute. One of the agents remained behind. He was in his early 40s with short gray hair. He showed his badge, Special Agent Harris, FBI. He looked between Owen and me. "Are you both all right?" I nodded. Owen looked shaken. "What just happened?" he asked quietly. Agent Harris spoke calmly. "We've been tracking Kozlov's organization for about 6 months. When Detective Santos informed us about the threat this morning, we positioned agents around the hospital." He gestured toward the hallway. "The 2 men who came in are low-level enforcers, but they're valuable. They'll help us move up the chain." He paused. "We've already identified the leader of the operation. His name is Viktor Kozlov. He operates primarily out of Las Vegas. With today's arrests, we now have enough evidence to move in." I sank back into the chair. "So it's finished, not quite," Harris said. "But we're close." He glanced toward Owen. "We will have agents posted outside this room around the clock. You and your son are safe." Owen still looked pale. I reached over and held his hand. "It's okay," I said softly. "They're gone. You're safe." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Dad, I was really scared. I know I said, but it's over." Agent Harris moved toward the door. "One last thing," he added. "Viktor Kozlov will likely be in custody within 48 hours. When that happens, the debt disappears." He looked directly at me. "Garrett's mistakes are not your responsibility." "Thank you," I said quietly. The agent nodded and stepped out of the room. A uniformed officer took position outside the doorway. I remained beside Owen. Slowly his breathing calmed. After several minutes, he spoke again. "Dad, yeah, I don't think I can take much more of this." I squeezed his hand gently. "You won't have to. We're almost through it, I promise." The call came a week later, just after sunrise. I was standing in the small kitchen of the Safe House apartment, flipping eggs in a frying pan, while the coffee machine gurgled softly behind me. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. Owen was still asleep down the hallway. These days he slept often, his body still trying to rebuild itself after 3 years of starvation and confinement and poison. When my phone vibrated on the counter and I saw Detective Santos's name on the screen, something in my chest tightened immediately. Bad news had a way of arriving early. I answered at once. "Mr. Hargrove Santos said." Her voice was controlled, but there was tension beneath it. "Garrett escaped." The spatula slipped slightly in my hand. I set it down carefully. "What do you mean, escaped?" I asked slowly. "He was being transported this morning from Pima County Jail to Phoenix," she explained. "They were moving him for his arraignment hearing. The transport van was on Interstate 10 when a semi-truck rear-ended it. Hard enough to trigger a multi-vehicle pileup." She exhaled. "In the confusion, officers securing the accident scene, paramedics arriving, Garrett disappeared." My stomach dropped. "He was still wearing handcuffs," she continued. "But about a quarter mile from the crash site, we found the cuffs on the roadside. They'd been cut off. Someone had tools ready." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "How is that possible?" I asked quietly. "You told me the transfer would be secure." "We believe the crash was planned," Santos replied. Frustration was creeping into her voice now. The truck driver abandoned the vehicle and fled before officers could question him. "We're investigating whether Viktor Kozlov's network helped arrange it." She paused. "Either way, Garrett had help." I closed my eyes briefly. "So, he's out there right now?" "Yes," Santos said. "Every agency in Arizona is searching FBIUS. Marshals, Border Patrol, State Police. But until we locate him, you and Owen are in danger. We're relocating you immediately." I looked down the hallway toward Owen's bedroom. The door was still closed. When I asked, "Within the hour. Pack only what you need. Federal agents are already on the way. They arrive faster than expected." Special Agent Harris returned this time, accompanied by a woman I hadn't met before, Agent Rachel Morales. Both moved with quiet urgency. Owen was still groggy when we woke him. He said nothing as they helped him into a wheelchair and guided him out to the waiting vehicle. Within minutes, we were on the road again. The Safe House was an ordinary apartment in North Phoenix. Nothing about it stood out, just another building in a row of identical complexes. But inside, security was already in place. The doors were reinforced. the windows covered with blackout curtains. Agent Harris walked us through the procedures. 2 agents will remain outside at all times, he explained. Do not open the door unless you hear the code phrase. What phrase? I asked. Phoenix Sunrise. He handed me a small burner phone. If you need anything, call this number only. Owen sat silently in his wheelchair during the entire explanation. His eyes were fixed on the floor. After the agent stepped outside, I crouched beside him. You okay? He looked up slowly. His face was pale. Dad, what if he finds us? I wanted to tell him that was impossible, but the truth was I didn't know anymore. Garrett had fooled everyone once before. Doctors, neighbors, police, even me. He won't, I said firmly. The FBI knows what they're doing. We're safe here. Owen nodded, but the fear in his eyes didn't disappear. That night, sleep refused to come. I sat in the dim living room staring at the burner phone resting on the coffee table, waiting, hoping it would ring with news that Garrett had been caught. But the phone remained silent. 2 days passed. Owen slowly improved. He could now walk short distances without the wheelchair, though his strength faded quickly. Most of our time was spent sitting quietly together. The television stayed on, but neither of us paid attention. Agent Morales checked on us twice each day. Every time I asked the same question, any updates every time she gave the same answer. Still searching. On the 3rd morning, the burner phone finally rang. I grabbed it instantly. Mr. Hargrove Santos said. Her voice sounded tired. We've uncovered something. What before escaping? Garrett managed to get a contraband phone inside the jail. My stomach tightened. He used it yesterday to contact Jessica. When? Yesterday afternoon. We traced the call, she said, but by the time we located the signal, he had already discarded the phone. What did he want? Money Santos replied. He demanded $50,000. Enough to disappear. And Jessica? I asked. She refused. She told him she's in custody and has no access to money. I waited, and then Santos hesitated. He threatened her. My chest tightened further. Specifically, he threatened Emma. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Emma, Jessica's 6-year-old daughter, my granddaughter. What exactly did he say? I asked quietly. He told Jessica he knows where Emma is, Santos said. He knows she's currently staying with Jessica's mother. If she doesn't find the money, he'll take it another way. My heart pounded. Where is Emma now? She's safe, Santos replied quickly. She's still in Tucson at her grandmother's house. We've placed 2 plainclothes officers there 24 hours a day. Emma has no idea any of this is happening. She believes she's simply visiting family, but Garrett will not reach her. I promise. I felt anger rising in my chest. You promised Garrett would be safely transported too, I said. And look how that turned out. Santos fell silent for a moment. You're right, she admitted. I can't promise anything with certainty. But we are doing everything possible. Garrett is desperate now, and desperate people make mistakes. We will catch him. I ended the call. For a long moment I sat on the couch with my head in my hands. Owen stood in the hallway watching me. Dad, what happened? I told him everything. About the smuggled phone, about the call, about Emma. Owen's face drained of color. He's threatening a little kid, he whispered. He's cornered, I said quietly. A man who has nothing left to lose. Owen sat beside me. His hands were trembling. What do we do now? I looked at the silent burner phone. We wait, I said. We trust the FBI to do their job, and we pray they find him before he finds Emma. But even as I spoke, one image refused to leave my mind. Garrett. Out there somewhere. Desperate. Dangerous. A man who had already destroyed so much. He had taken my wife. He had imprisoned my son. And now he was threatening my granddaughter. I remembered the promises I had made to Owen. That he was safe. That Garrett could never hurt him again. And I couldn't help wondering how many more of those promises would break before this nightmare finally ended. 3 days after Garrett vanished, Detective Santos called again. Her voice sounded different this time, focused, almost cautious. Mr. Hargrove, she said, we may have a way to catch him. But before we move forward, I need your permission. I was sitting in the safe house kitchen when the call came. Owen was asleep down the hall, finally getting the rest his body desperately needed. What kind of plan? I asked. It involves Jessica. The words made my chest tighten. She's willing to cooperate. I slowly lowered myself into a chair, gripping the edge of the kitchen table. Cooperate? How? Santos paused before answering. Garrett contacted her again. He's desperate for money. We want to use that desperation against him. You mean Jessica will agree to meet him and deliver the cash he demanded? When Garrett shows up to collect it, federal agents will already be waiting. I stared at the table. You want to use my daughter as bait. I want to give her the chance to do the right thing, Santos replied carefully. She's terrified Garrett will hurt Emma. This is her way of protecting her daughter. She paused. But I need you involved in this decision. Can you come down to the FBI office? I didn't want to see Jessica again. The last time we spoke, I had walked away feeling nothing but emptiness. My daughter had become a stranger to me, but if this plan could finally stop Garrett, I didn't have the luxury of refusing. I'll be there in an hour, I said. The FBI Phoenix field office stood downtown like a fortress of glass and steel. Inside, everything felt sterile and controlled. Santos met me in the lobby and guided me through security checkpoints before leading me into a conference room on the 3rd floor. Jessica was already there. She sat at the long table with her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked thinner than I remembered, exhausted, pale, hollow. When she saw me, tears immediately filled her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, "thank you for coming." I sat across from her without reacting. Agent Harris stood near the door watching the room with folded arms. Santos took the seat beside me. Jessica has agreed to cooperate in apprehending Garrett. Santos began. She placed a folder on the table. Here's how the operation will work. 2 days ago, Garrett demanded $50,000. Jessica will message him back and agree to meet. She'll bring a briefcase containing marked bills. When Garrett arrives to collect it, agents will move in. Where will this happen? I asked. A public location, Harris said. Starbucks on Mill Avenue in Tempe. Busy area. Lots of people around. Garrett won't feel threatened in a crowded place, but we'll control the environment. And if he realizes it's a trap, Harris answered calmly. We're prepared for that possibility. Jessica will wear a concealed wire so we can hear everything. Undercover agents will already be inside the coffee shop and positioned outside. He won't know we're there until it's too late. I turned my attention to Jessica. Why are you doing this? Her voice trembled. Because I can't let him hurt Emma. She wiped her face. I know what I did was wrong. I helped him. I lied. I betrayed you and Owen. Her eyes met mine. But Emma is innocent. If there's even a chance Garrett might go after her, I have to stop him. I studied her for a long moment. All I saw was fear. If this goes wrong, I began. It won't, Harris said firmly. We've conducted operations like this many times. Garrett is desperate. That makes him predictable. He'll show up. Santos looked at me. We need your consent. You're the primary victim in this case. If you don't want Jessica involved, we'll find another approach. I looked at my daughter again. She was crying quietly, her cuffed hands folded in front of her. I thought about Linda, about Owen, about Emma growing up with Garrett's shadow hanging over her life. Do it, I said. Catch him. 2 days later, I found myself sitting inside the back of an FBI surveillance van, parked 2 blocks away from the Starbucks on Mill Avenue. The interior of the van was crowded with equipment. Multiple monitors displayed live video feeds from several cameras, body cams on undercover agents' interior cameras from the coffee shop, and one focused on the outdoor patio. Agent Harris sat beside me, wearing a headset while coordinating with agents through a radio. Agent Morales was already inside the cafe, posing as a customer. Jessica had arrived 15 minutes early. On the monitor, I watched her sit at a small table on the patio. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse. Beneath the fabric, the thin microphone wire remained invisible. A black briefcase rested on the table in front of her. She looked calm, but when she lifted her coffee cup, I could see her hands shaking. She's doing well, Harris said quietly. The wire is transmitting perfectly. I nodded without taking my eyes off the screen. The patio looked busy. Students with laptops, couples chatting over iced drinks, a man sitting alone reading a newspaper. But every single one of them was an FBI agent. Even the barista inside the coffee shop was undercover. And outside, a couple walking their dog along the sidewalk were agents too. Garrett had no idea he was walking into a trap. At exactly 3 o'clock, a figure appeared at the edge of the patio. My chest tightened instantly. Baseball cap pulled low. Dark sunglasses, black hoodie, Garrett. He approached, slowly scanning the area with cautious eyes before sitting down across from Jessica. At first, I couldn't hear their conversation. Then Harris adjusted the audio feed. Jessica's voice came through clearly. "You're alone?" Garrett asked. "Yes," she said quietly. "Just like you told me." Garrett glanced around one more time. "Where's the money?" Jessica pushed the briefcase toward him. $50,000. It's everything I could get. Garrett opened the case. Even through the grainy video feed, I could see stacks of cash. He pulled one bundle out and flipped through it quickly. My hands tightened into fists. Harris spoke into the radio. "Hold positions. Wait for the signal." Jessica spoke again. "Garrett, please." He didn't look up. "What?" "Promise me you won't go near Emma." Garrett continued counting. "I'm not promising anything. You should have helped me the first time." Jessica's voice shook slightly. "I trust you." Harris leaned forward. "That's the signal." He pressed the radio. "Go! Go! Go!" Everything exploded into motion. On the monitors, I watched agents converge from every direction. Morales burst out of the cafe with her badge raised. The couple with the dog sprinted toward the patio. The man with the newspaper threw it aside and revealed an FBI vest. Garrett looked up. His eyes widened. He shoved the table toward Jessica, sending her chair crashing backward. Then he ran, but he barely made it 10 feet. One of the agents tackled him hard, slamming him onto the pavement. Within seconds, his arms were pulled behind his back and cuffed. He struggled, shouting something I couldn't hear. But it didn't matter. It was over. Agents lifted him up and dragged him toward a waiting black SUV. I leaned back in my seat, every muscle in my body finally releasing. Harris glanced at me. "We've got him, Mr. Hargrove. This time, he's not getting away." I nodded, unable to speak. On the monitor, Jessica remained seated at the patio table. Her face was buried in her hands. An agent approached her and spoke quietly. She nodded. Then she looked up toward the camera, toward the van. Toward me. Her lips formed 2 silent words. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because even though Garrett was finally in custody, even though the nightmare might finally be ending, I couldn't forget what Jessica had done, what she had allowed to happen. Sorry would never erase that. But for now, none of that mattered. Garrett Vance was captured, and Emma was safe. Before I reveal the secret Garrett believed would remain buried forever, take a moment and comment too, so I know you're still following this story with me. And a quick reminder, the next part includes certain fictionalized details, added to deepen the narrative. Some events may not perfectly reflect real life. If that makes you uncomfortable, this would be the moment to step away. For exactly 4 seconds after Agent Harris gave the command, the coffee shop patio on Mill Avenue was completely silent. Then chaos erupted. Garrett didn't run toward the entrance like most people would. Instead, he spun away from the table and sprinted across the outdoor patio, knocking over a metal chair and sending a small potted cactus crashing onto the ground. The clay pot shattered against the concrete. He made it maybe 10 feet. Agent Foster hit him like a linebacker. The impact drove Garrett forward, slamming him face first into the red brick pavement. 2 more agents rushed in, immediately grabbing his arms and wrenching them behind his back. The handcuffs snapped shut with a sharp metallic click. I stood beside the FBI surveillance van, my hands trembling. For a moment, Garrett lay still. Then he twisted his head sideways. Blood smeared across his cheek where the brick had scraped his skin. His eyes found me instantly. Through the chain-link fence separating the parking lot from the patio, he stared directly at me. His lips slowly curled upward, not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. "You should have died in your sleep, old man," he shouted. His voice was wild, cracked with fury. "You and your son, both of you, should be dead by now." Agent Harris grabbed him by the collar and hauled him upright. Garrett continued twisting around, trying to keep his eyes locked on me. "None of this was supposed to happen," he yelled. "You ruined everything." But the agents ignored him. They dragged him across the pavement toward a black SUV, waiting near the curb. Even as they shoved him into the back seat, he was still shouting, his voice dissolving into a mess of rage and hatred. Then the door slammed shut. The SUV pulled away. I stood on the sun-baked pavement watching until the vehicle disappeared into traffic. Only then did I realize how hard my heart was pounding. Detective Santos stepped up beside me. She placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. "He's being taken straight to the FBI Phoenix field office," she said. "They'll begin questioning him tonight." Her voice softened slightly. "You should head home, Mr. Hargrove. Try to rest." I nodded automatically, but deep down, I knew rest wasn't coming. The next morning, Santos called again. Her tone had changed. There was something careful, almost heavy in the way she spoke. "Mr. Hargrove, I'd like you to come down to the FBI office." "Is something wrong?" I asked. "We recovered something from Garrett's computer." She paused. "I think you should see it in person." The FBI building on North 7th Street looked cold and imposing, steel glass and polished stone. Inside, everything echoed with quiet professionalism. Santos met me in the lobby and escorted me through multiple security checkpoints before guiding me to a small evidence room on the third floor. Agent Harris was already there. He stood beside a metal table where a laptop sat open. "We seized Garrett's laptop from his home office yesterday," Santos explained. "Our digital forensics team managed to crack the password early this morning." She hesitated before continuing. "What we found," she looked directly at me, "is disturbing." Harris rotated the laptop so I could see the screen. Santos navigated deep into the system folders before opening one labeled simply Project M. Inside were 4 files. Only 4, but they felt heavier than anything I had ever seen. Santos opened the first file, Owen_log.docs. The screen filled with text, hundreds of entries, each one neatly dated, each one describing my son's captivity in chilling detail. Day 1, July 18th, 2020. Subject secured. Provided water and 1 slice of bread. Subject shouting. Soundproofing effective. Day 456, November 16th, 2021. Subject still alive, but weakening. Visible muscle atrophy. Progress satisfactory. Day 1095, July 15th, 2023. Subject mostly unresponsive. CO exposure increasing. RM also exhibiting symptoms. Timeline remains on schedule. My stomach turned. I couldn't keep reading. The room blurred. He documented everything Santos said quietly. Every meal he dropped through the vent. Every time Owen begged for help. Every stage of his physical decline. Her voice carried controlled anger. To him, it was a project. Harris clicked the second file. attic_cam_footage.mp4. The screen flickered. A grainy security video appeared. The timestamp read August 12th, 2021, 11:47 p.m. Owen sat on the floor in the corner of the attic. He looked impossibly thin, his face hollow. For several seconds he didn't move. He simply stared at the door. Then suddenly he lunged forward. His fist slammed against the wood. "Please," he screamed. "Somebody help me." He pounded harder. "I'm locked in here." His voice cracked. "Dad? Jessica? Anyone?" I covered my mouth with my hand. Santos quickly paused the video. "There are 18 hours of recordings like this," she said softly. "We don't need to watch them all." Her jaw tightened. Garrett kept these videos. He watched them. He wanted to see Owen suffer. I pushed my chair back and staggered toward the wall. My stomach churned violently. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. Santos handed me a bottle of water. "Take a minute," she said. I forced myself to breathe. Eventually, I sat down again. Harris opened the third file, co_schedule.xlsx. An Excel spreadsheet appeared. Its columns were labeled with frightening precision. Date, furnace, runtime hours. Estimated CO parts per million. Target expected. Time frame to incapacitation. Notes, the first row read, May 15th, 2023, 8 hours, 50 parts per million. RM, bedroom 60 to 90 days, slow escalation. RM unaware. My hands tightened. The final row read, July 15th, 2023, 12 hours, 200 plus parts per million. RM plus MM, 7 to 14 days. If RM dies first, MM follows within 48 hours. Inheritance secured. I stared at the screen. "He scheduled your death," Santos said coldly, "down to the exact day." She pointed at the numbers. "He calculated the carbon monoxide levels needed to poison you slowly, not fast enough to trigger suspicion, but fast enough that both you and Owen would be dead before August." Her voice hardened. This was premeditated murder. Harris closed the spreadsheet. Then he opened the final file. A photograph appeared on the screen. My wife. Linda lay on our bed. Her hands rested peacefully across her chest. Her face looked pale, still. The timestamp read November 12th, 2019, 6:42 a.m. 2 hours before Garrett called 911. 2 hours before he told the world she had simply passed away in her sleep. "He took this picture before calling for help," Santos said quietly. "He kept it," her voice lowered, "as a trophy." I felt something inside me crack open all over again. No tears came. No words, only silence. Santos slowly closed the laptop. Garrett waived his right to legal counsel during interrogation last night, she said. Her voice carried no sympathy. He told us, and I quote, she looked directly at me. I'm only sorry I didn't finish the job. The room felt colder. He has absolutely no remorse, she continued. Psychological evaluation indicates severe antisocial personality traits. In plain language, he's a sociopath. I swallowed. What happens next? Arraignment will take place next week at Maricopa County Superior Court, Santos said. You and Owen will testify. She leaned forward slightly. But I want you to understand something clearly. The evidence against Garrett Vance is overwhelming. She gestured toward the laptop. The logs, the videos, the poisoning schedule. There's no defense for this. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. I nodded slowly, but the fear didn't disappear. Garrett had escaped once already. Santos seemed to read my thoughts. She leaned forward and met my eyes. That won't happen again. Her voice was firm. I promise. I wanted to believe her. But after everything I had witnessed, after everything Garrett had done, I wasn't sure I believed in promises anymore. The Maricopa County Superior Court building rose against the September sky like a monument to justice, glass and steel and sharp angles. Owen and I climbed the front steps together, moving slowly. He leaned on a three-legged cane, his shoulders still too thin beneath his pressed white shirt, and I walked beside him in the gray suit I hadn't worn since Linda's funeral. Inside, courtroom 5C smelled of old wood and stale air. The walls were dark oak, the benches hard and unforgiving. 2 flags hung behind the judge's bench. Arizona's Copper Star and the Stars and Stripes and the jury box sat to the left, 12 empty chairs waiting to decide a man's fate. We took our seats in the front row. Detective Santos nodded to us from across the aisle. A moment later, the side door opened and 2 bailiffs led Garrett into the room. He wore an orange jumpsuit, hands and ankles shackled, but he walked with his head up, expression blank. His eyes swept over the courtroom over me, and there was nothing in them. No fear, no shame. Just cold, empty space. Jessica sat at a separate table near the back, dressed in a blue jail uniform. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Barbara Hendricks entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a face carved from years of hearing the worst humanity had to offer. We stood. She sat. The room settled. The state of Arizona versus Garrett Michael Vance, she said. Counsel, are we ready to proceed? Prosecutor Thomas Cooper rose. Yes, Your Honor. Defense Attorney Martin Pierce nodded. Ready, Your Honor. Judge Hendricks gestured to Cooper. Opening statement. Cooper stepped to the center and faced the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about trust, about betrayal, and about a man who spent 3 years executing a cold-blooded, calculated plan to destroy an entire family for money. He outlined the charges: Count 1, first-degree murder of Linda Hargrove in 2019 through deliberate carbon monoxide poisoning. Count 2, attempted murder of Edmund and Owen Hargrove in 2023 using the same method. Count 3, kidnapping and false imprisonment of Owen Hargrove from July 2020 to July 2023. The evidence will show that Garrett Vance is not a desperate man who made a mistake. He is a predator who planned every detail, who documented his crimes, and who felt no remorse even as his victims suffered. The trial lasted 4 days. Ryan Brennan testified, first describing the locked attic door, the carbon monoxide alarm, the sabotaged heat exchanger. He was calm, professional, and unshakable on cross-examination. Detective Santos followed, walking the jury through the forensic evidence, Garrett's laptop, with the hidden Project M folder, the fabricated news articles about Owen's fake death. The Excel spreadsheet calculating lethal CO exposure timelines the photograph of Linda's body taken before Garrett called 911. The jury sat in silence. Then Owen took the stand. He gripped the railing as he swore the oath, his hand trembling. Cooper asked him to describe his captivity. Owen's voice was thin, fragile, but it carried. I was locked in that room for 3 years, he said. Garrett drugged me the night I arrived. When I woke up, the door was bolted. He fed me through event-bred water canned beans. There was no toilet, just a bucket. No light except what came through a crack in the roof. I screamed until my throat bled. I pounded on the door until my hands broke. No one came. He looked at Garrett. He told me I was just an obstacle, that he'd keep me there until no one remembered I existed. And when I started getting sick, when the headaches got so bad I couldn't stand, he told me it was carbon monoxide. He said, "You and your father will be gone soon, and then everything will be mine. Garrett didn't blink. Pierce had no questions. Finally, Cooper called me. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Cooper asked me to describe my relationship with Garrett. Garrett came into our lives in 2018, I said. He married my daughter. He was kind, helpful, respectful. I trusted him, and he used that trust to plan my wife's death, to imprison my son, and to try to take everything we had. My voice cracked. I will never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. Cooper nodded gently. Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. No further questions? Pierce stood, hesitated, then sat back down. No cross, Your Honor. Closing arguments were swift. Cooper, this is not a case of desperation. This is a case of evil. Pierce, my client is guilty, but he is also human. I ask for mercy. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood and read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant Garrett Michael Vance guilty on count 1, first-degree murder. Guilty on count 2, attempted murder, 2 counts. Guilty on count 3, kidnapping and false imprisonment. Owen gripped my hand. Garrett stared straight ahead. Judge Hendricks asked if Garrett had anything to say before sentencing. Garrett stood. He looked directly at me, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Then I'm only sorry, he said slowly, that I didn't finish what I started. The courtroom froze. Judge Hendricks' face hardened. Garrett Vance, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for count 1. You will serve an additional 30 years, consecutive for counts 2 and 3. You will never walk free again. 2 bailiffs moved in. Garrett was led away. Shackles clinking against the tile floor. Owen and I walked out into the bright Phoenix afternoon. He stopped on the courthouse steps and looked at me. Dad, he said, we won. I wanted to believe him. But Linda was gone. Owen had lost 3 years he'd never get back. Jessica was going to prison. Emma would grow up without her mother. No son, I said softly. There are no winners in this story. He squeezed my shoulder, and we walked toward the car, 2 men carrying wounds that would never fully heal. The headstone was simple polished gray granite with her name carved in clean letters, Linda Ann Hargrove, 1955 to 2019, beloved wife and mother. I knelt on the grass, the July sun beating down on my shoulders, and placed a bouquet of white roses at the base. Linda, I whispered, you left us too soon. You deserve so much better. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. My voice cracked. I touched the cool stone, tracing her name with my fingertips. But I promise you, I'll take care of Owen. I'll take care of Emma. I'll make sure your life meant something. Owen stood a few feet behind me, leaning on his cane. He'd come a long way in 2 years. He'd gained back 30 pounds. His hair was neatly trimmed, and the hollow look in his eyes had softened. But his hands still trembled sometimes, a permanent reminder of the carbon monoxide that had nearly taken him. I stood brushing the dirt from my knees and turned to him. He smiled gently. She would be proud of you, Dad, he said. I hope so. We walked together along the cemetery path, past rows of graves and flowering desert shrubs. The air smelled like sage and dry earth. How's Sarah? I asked. Owen's face brightened. She's good, really good. It took a long time, Dad. When I first showed up at her door in Seattle, she didn't believe it was me. She thought I'd abandoned her and Lily. He paused, swallowing hard. When I told her the truth, when I showed her the news reports, the court documents, she cried for a week. She kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't know. That she had no way of knowing, I said. We went to therapy together, couples counseling. It took months, but we got through it. And now we're rebuilding. We have a little place in Ballard. Lily's in kindergarten. She's amazing, Dad. She's smart and funny and so full of life. My chest tightened. I'm so glad, son. You deserve that happiness. We reached a bench beneath a mesquite tree and sat down. Have you been to see Jessica? Owen asked carefully. I nodded. Last month, I drove out to Perryville. I'd visited Jessica at the women's prison. She wore a blue uniform, her hair cut short, her face bare of makeup. She looked older than 40. I'm so sorry, Dad, she'd said, through the glass partition, tears streaming. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I failed you. I failed Owen. I failed Emma. I'd finally said, Jessica, you made terrible choices. You let fear control you. But Emma still needs to know her mother loves her. When you get out in 10 years, you'll have a chance to make things right. Don't waste it. I told Owen all of this now. He listened quietly. How is Emma? He asked. She's doing well. She's 11 now, living with Jessica's mother in Tucson. I drive down to see her once a month. We get ice cream, go to the park. She asks about her mom sometimes. I tell her the truth that her mom made a mistake and has to stay away for a while, but that she still loves her. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, do you blame yourself?" I looked at him surprised. "Every day." "You shouldn't." "How can I not?" My voice rose. "I lived in that house for 3 years. You were right above me, locked in a room, and I didn't know. I didn't hear you. I trusted Garrett when I should have questioned him. I failed you, Owen. I failed your mother." Owen reached over and took my hand. "Dad, stop. Garrett was the criminal, not you. He manipulated all of us. He was a sociopath. He planned every step, every lie. You couldn't have known." "But I should have." "No." His voice was firm. "You did everything you could. And when you finally found out, you didn't hesitate. You called the police. You fought for me. You saved my life." Tears blurred my vision. "Do you forgive me?" Owen pulled me into a hug. "Dad, there's nothing to forgive. I love you." I held him tightly, this son I'd nearly lost, and let myself cry. We left the cemetery together, walking toward the parking lot. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, the kind of sky that made you believe in new beginnings. "What are your plans now?" Owen asked. I leaned against the hood thinking. I sold the house in Scottsdale. I couldn't live there anymore. I bought a small apartment downtown near the hospital, and I've been volunteering. At a domestic violence center, I said. I share my story with other families, people who've been manipulated, controlled, isolated by someone they trusted. I tell them what happened to us, and I help them recognize the warning signs. Owen smiled. "That's good, Dad. Really good. I want our story to mean something," I said. "Linda's death. Your 3 years in that room. All of it. If I can help even one person see the truth before it's too late, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing." Owen opened the passenger door, then paused. "Dad, do you think we'll ever be okay? Really okay?" I looked at him, at this man who'd survived hell and come out the other side scarred but standing. And I thought about Emma growing up in Tucson, about Jessica serving her sentence and maybe someday finding redemption, about Linda resting beneath the desert sky. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same," I said slowly, "but I think we can be okay. It'll take time. It'll take work, but we're still here. We're still fighting." Owen smiled. "Then that's enough." We got into the car and I started the engine. As we pulled out of the cemetery, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, watching Linda's grave disappear into the distance. The past will always hurt, but we don't have to let it define us. We can choose to move forward together. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Looking back now, standing on the other side of everything that happened, I realized this was more than just a painful memory. It became a lesson I wish I had understood sooner. This family story taught me something important. Trust, when given blindly, can become a weapon in the wrong hands. I believed Garrett because he was family. I ignored the small warning signs, the locked attic, the strange excuses, the moments that didn't quite make sense. In my mind, questioning him felt like questioning my own family. But the truth is that many tragedies begin exactly that way, hidden behind what looks like a normal family story. To those listening to this family story, remember something I learned through pain. Sometimes God places difficult people in our lives, not to break us, but to reveal our strength. Through everything that happened, I discovered resilience I never knew I had. And eventually, I learned forgiveness, not for the man who caused the harm, but for myself. Because the truth about family betrayal is that it rarely arrives as something obvious. It grows quietly in silence, hidden behind trust and familiarity. And when family betrayal finally reveals itself, it can shake the very foundation of everything you believed about the people closest to you. So, if there is one message I want to leave behind, it is this: never ignore your instincts. When someone isolates you, controls the information around you, or makes you feel like your concerns are irrational, pay attention. Those are often the earliest signs of family betrayal. What some people might call revenge, I see differently. My version of justice was never about hatred. My answer to that pain was rebuilding, healing, refusing to let one moment of darkness define the rest of my life. Owen and I rebuilt everything step by step, slowly creating a new chapter after the chaos. That is the ending of our family story, not one defined by bitterness, but by survival and hope. If this story meant something to you, I'd truly appreciate hearing your thoughts in the comments. You can also support the channel by subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Please remember that parts of this narrative include fictionalized elements created for storytelling and reflection. If this type of content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better match what you enjoy. And always remember this, you are stronger than you think. And no matter how dark a moment may feel, you are never truly alone.